welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. My guest today is Michael King. He is returning. We had so much to discuss the last time. We ran out of time. So this is really going to be kind of like a part two, but we've laid out the direction we're going in is a little bit different. He's got a very, very interesting theory that we really don't hear too often. You know, people talk about secret societies. You hear Masons thrown around a lot. There's all sorts of, names for the puppet masters, but we'll get into it. He's got a very interesting theory on where a lot of the cultural and ideological, I would say, problems that we're seeing today stem from. So we're going to dive into that. Before I invite him on, and I'm very excited for this. He does fantastic research, and it really is kind of unusual. But before we dive into that, I want to give you an opportunity to check out my Substack, because that is where you can get all of my podcasts early access and ad-free. And it is also where you can follow all the articles that I'm writing. And by the time this is released, I will probably have a recent one that I've been working on for a very long time. So I think it's going to be a pretty good one. So pretty exciting. But that's where you can check out all my articles, all my podcasts, early access. It goes to Substack first, and it also goes ad-free. So if that's something you want, then for $8 American monthly, you can support the work I'm doing, which goes a long way for me. And it's also where you can get all this early access and free content. So check that out. That is CourtenayTurner.substack.com. And of course, you can also go to my website. I have all my platforms, various podcast platforms listed there. So you can choose whichever one you prefer, and all the great ways you can support my work as well. So without further ado, let's bring on Mike. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for coming back. Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you. So I think we were catching up to Enlightenment period last time. I don't think we quite got there. But yeah, so, and some things we were talking about before you jumped on, before we turned the camera on, you were talking about how people kind of blame the Enlightenment for a lot of pretty much everything today. There's a large group of people who are doing that. And a lot of these problems definitely stem from much, much earlier. I would also say that they're not the entire, they're treating the Enlightenment kind of as a monolith, which it certainly was not. There was a lot of competing factions of ideas and thought within the Enlightenment school. So there were many schools of Enlightenment thinkers. So I think that's hugely problematic. But I also think that there was a lot of infiltration coming through prior to that we're seeing reflected certainly today. So maybe, I'm going to turn it over to you. Where do you want to go with that?
Well, we did get the Enlightenment. I actually got to Rene Descartes, got to the Augsburg Peace Treaty, how the 30 Years War chaos was orchestrated to elicit mass skepticism. So we're actually going to come back to that, because skepticism is, I'd argue, the first stage of initiation. So like you were talking about the secret societies, what I'd argue you saw with the Enlightenment is you would have some organic opposing factions, but you'd also have those factions be leveraged for a controlled dialectic with Rosicrucian or Jesuit agents on both those sides. And I'd argue the inner levels, those two things, by the time of the Enlightenment, would have actually been the same hierarchy. It's like you could have outer level members oppose each other, where it's like what you see is what you get, but what the public sees with a lot of these groups isn't what you get. They're all working together at the inner levels, and it has to do with how they have a methodology where they can superimpose other metaphysics onto people's beliefs. So that's how it works. Because like on the outer levels, you have people accepting logic that actually nullifies what they think they're accepting, and it's only revealed to the inner level initiates. So when it comes to what happened with the Enlightenment, what people blame it for, what's actually going on is you have prior sets of esoteric schools that all were refined and filtered through more specific Enlightenment figures, like the chain from Rene Descartes to John Locke. And maybe not everything John Locke said was bad, but rather you think he was in on it or not, his ideas were definitely leveraged towards epistemic skepticism.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there's a lot of evidence that he was funded by
Yeah.
Crown,
Well,
yeah, so
yeah, and British he was with the British East India Company, but yeah, and then
exactly.
he put yeah, so what the problem with John Locke, we're gonna cover the Enlightenment in more detail later, but just keep in mind, he posited, where does knowledge come from? Well, we're a blank slate, and as a blank slate, we're our senses are this conveyor belt. So your sense is this conveyor belt where this abstract thing called data comes in, and then according to your blank slate and your experiences, you arrange that data that comes into your senses, and that's where ideas come from. And he tried to discredit the idea of innate ideas, innate cat because it's like
Mhm.
if there's no innate ideas, then there's no prior grid to which the conveyor belt of data can plug itself in. It's like there's no kind of ordering principle for that. And John Locke kind of
Tabula rasa.
trashes yeah, he trashes thought that way, so it's like there's two different sides of dialectic, either it's pure reason
Right,
or it's all senses.
right.
That's complete straw man, but what's refined out of that is Immanuel Kant, who I'd argue codified all 7 of the Hermetic laws, the laws of the cult of Hermes,
Yes.
and made them mainstream, and from there, you had Hegel spiritualizing it and putting it in metaphysical form, and Karl Marx
Mm,
inverted it for the atheism and nihilism that the core group of these secret societies actually wanted to implement. But what I'd say is going on with the Enlightenment there is there's earlier systems and there's earlier groups who were leveraging those events to more or less externalize their initiation rites into mainstream society. And I'd argue look at things like social emotional learning. That's part of it because what it essentially is it's a methodology that when it messes with fundamental categories of being, fundamental categories of knowledge, that elicits a certain level of cognitive dissonance in someone. It's like it's impossible for someone to accept these ideas on how the world works and not be a hypocrite in some way or not have some cognitive dissonance. So if you can get trick people into having cognitive dissonance, but then you accept whatever the intelligentsia says, you accept whatever narrative they give you to mitigate that cognitive dissonance, then you're more or less under their control. And if you look at social emotional learning coming out of Lucius Trust, which is being pumped out through UNESCO. So this is highest levels of global education. They're pushing
yep.
this in the EU, United States, all these countries. They literally say, "Oh well, you can expect people to have cognitive dissonance, and we're gonna give you these prescriptions to deal with." Well, this came straight out of esoteric secret societies that I'd argue actually go back thousands of years. Now, just really quick with the last point I want to make is one of the narratives I see muddying the water is that there is evidence of secret societies going back that long, but another issue I have with the kind of narratives where most people talk about where, oh, it's all one group because look, you have all these layers of secrecy where I think there might have been one original thing, then you would have had some aspects of it splinter apart and use similar methods, but maybe they lost contact with each other in different parts of the world, then maybe they'd come back together and other times, then maybe they'd even have a couple of disagreements, but then they'd come back again. Because the way
You see
the
this
reason why
everywhere. You
well
see
the
this all
reason
the time, yeah.
well it's just because the reason why I want to get to that is because if you look at things that way where it's just all one thing, it's all a monolith, then you get this idea that if you guys are into conspiracy stuff, you might have heard of a 15-minute city. So the 15-minute city, it's pretty much these compartmentalized grid cities where they can control every aspect of life. Like the way these people frame it is they've had that level of control for 2,000 plus years, and I completely disagree with that.
Yeah. I would agree. I think that that's absurd. Things are not the world is way too complicated for there to be like a monolith like that, or for there to be one group that controls everything. I
Well,
think
like
that
if it's, yeah, I think a lot of these truthers actually were so we talked about Hermeticism and Gnosticism being the operating system behind a lot of these ideas. So if you look at the Gnostic operating system, what you have is the world is fake. Reality is an illusion. You can't trust your senses, and you gotta have this esoteric secret knowledge to see the pattern of the universe to know how things really work. It's like
Mhm.
these guys, they make the demiurge, the quote unquote empire, or sometimes they'll start with Nimrod. So it's like Nimrod is the demiurge, then the global empire, that's the Gnostic prison. And because they can see the hidden hand and everything, they have the esoteric knowledge to escape the prison. It actually turns into a form of praxis where it's like you have to call everything fake and tell other people that everything's fake. And that's kind of like their version of praxis or atonement in that Gnostic system. And it's almost like you gotta go make other initiates. That's why it can take on pretty cultic characteristics. Like I've seen that on Twitter, and I've seen people's minds melt over this stuff. Actually, it's pretty scary.
I agree, and I think this is why they're trying to convince people that we live in a simulation, right? If you can convince people that everything is fake, then they can just construct it to whatever they want it to be.
Exact. Yeah. I know. I mean, and I'm seeing AI program that. I posted a video of this on my Twitter, but there was someone asking the AI like, "Hey, what's the meaning of the universe?" And like, well,
Oh
really,
yeah,
it's you need to understand there's an illusion of separation where we're not really separate. We're all God knowing himself. So what you're seeing AI being programmed by these esoteric cultists who are at the top of these big tech companies trying to initiate everyone into
I
their nonsense and
that's what
mainstream
I've
it.
been
Yeah.
talking about with the game B, but the Dark Enlightenment does it too. Yeah, it's all through Silicon Valley. They all worship this kind of cultic belief system. Yeah, they're
Well, yeah, but when it comes to people seeing it coming from one thing, going way back, um, so this is gonna segue from the Enlightenment. We're gonna go back
yeah.
to the
Let's go
Enlightenment, but
back.
I wanna go back to give. We're gonna be going through maybe 800 years of history, 1,200 years of
Okay,
history with a bird's eye view. But even
buckle
before
up.
that, when people say like, oh look, it's one thing. So and whenever one of the things people look at when they want to say everything's Masonic, everything's controlled by Masons, they look at numerology, they look at numbers, they look at people referring to astrology. So
Yeah,
I don't get into astrology much because I think it's a dead end. I think the field has been infiltrated. But biblically speaking, there are a reason for those numbers showing up in the Bible. So and there are allegories in the Bible to the stars, to the
sure.
moon, to the sun. So these people that say everything's Masonic, everything's controlled, they'll get into this weird like, oh, the Flavians and the House of Piso. They like Josephus actually secretly wrote the Bible. He forged Paul's epistles and he forged the Gospels, and they were doing this weird Masonic numerology plug and play game to rewrite the sacking of Jerusalem to try and pacify these rebel Jews. Like they'll say that from there you had the Catholic Church come out of the Roman Empire, and that way like it was all very compartmentalized and controlled. It's like I strongly disagree with that, but I think one of the reasons why you have these numbers come up is because there actually was a, you could say, perennial set of beliefs. And I'd say it came from the flood in early humanity. So a lot of people say, "Oh, there's no proof that people came from just three people. There's no proof of Shem, Ham, and Japheth." But this would be another podcast to get into entirely. But there are actually articles proving this and shows proving this. If you do the math, it's mathematically impossible that we did not come from three sets of men and women going back at the very most 5,000 years. It's literally mathematically impossible. So you'd have a small set of people that would. Oh, and then another thing is literally every single culture says there was a flood. So right, if you're an atheist and you want to say, oh, the flood is fake, it's like, okay, maybe but that's something happened to where that's been ingrained in collective humanity's memory. So whatever you want to say, it's obviously a thing. Rather it's just symbolic or not. There's something there, and it's constantly referred to. So people will see a kind of unity and symbolism, and they'll assume, oh well, there must have always been this organizational hierarchy behind that every step of the way. But what I see maybe some kind of perennial truth that related to the stars, that related to the heavens, but it turned from pointing to a transcendent reality to just being about the heavens, where they started worshiping the stars. And astral bodies, and then later on animals and humans in themselves, and you get polytheism from that, and then another degradation from that is the idea that the divine isn't everything, and you'd have pantheism. So I think what you're seeing going on is you're seeing a common set of assumptions that then gets institutionalized and corrupted in this kind of, it wasn't like, yeah, you'd have a priest class running everything back in these pagan societies. It would be used for power, and it would be used for mind control. And you would have esoteric secret societies going back to ancient times, and it would keep on, it would go on to be more internal, like more meditate, more repetition, more look within yourself. And it eventually went from worship of the transcendent to worship of intelligence and intellect, and from there self deification, where
Yes.
oh, if we're all God experiencing ourselves, and our destiny is to realize we are God and collectively ascend. So I think that's more of what you're looking at.
I think that's right. I'll just interject really quickly. When you're talking about, the heavens versus the stars, I think part of what happens is that it shifted from the creation, right? That was the creator has made to now worshiping the creation, right? So that's I think that's a very important distinction in the shift. So that and that's part of where
It,
you get this polytheism, right?
well, it's what Steve Coughlin says, where it goes from transcendent to the immanent. Steve
Yeah,
Coughlin,
exactly.
yeah, your friend. He's very correct about that.
Yep.
Well, yeah, and geographically though, so in, I think one of the reasons why in Bible prophecy you see it talk about Eastern wind a lot. When you see Eastern wind in private Bible prophecy, you're looking at Eastern mysticism being injected, because for whatever reason, you'd have secret societies come up in the East where you had more of this inward turning mysticism and
Mhm.
repeat mantras like you see that coming out, of Tibet. So this is where I'm going to go with some of the quotes I've read, or
Okay.
I've emailed you.
Yeah, great.
So this is from Bill Cooper's Mystery Babylon. About one third of these are actually from him, but it's because I disagree with some of the details Bill Cooper reports on, but his overall framework, I think, is pretty spot on.
Mhm.
So the origin of mystery ceremonies seems to be India, or at least the place and time which the Brahmin priesthood started its initiations. The ceremonies were based upon Hindu myths, but the procedure followed in training the aspirant is strikingly similar in Egypt. In Egypt, profoundly influenced Greece. So he's saying that India developed these methodologies where you have this inward turning mystic kind of initiation, and then it would be turned outward to a methodology for controlling people. So that, and it would move from India to Egypt. But I want to correct one thing.
Mhm.
This is one of the things that I disagree with Cooper on. So this would be a I could I gotta do a little bit more reading to tie up loose ends, but it actually looks to me like it comes from China. It actually looks to me like pantheism doesn't come from India; it comes from China. And India, there's no record of this. I'm speculating on what happened off record, but it definitely seems like Brahman was originally talking about a monotheistic god. Because by the way, the Vedas and the Indian scriptures we have, they are much later than they were written. So
Mhm.
there's segments of it, some of which are much older than other ones, and other ones are more later, I'd say, retcon tradition. So not all of their beliefs even teach pantheism. So a lot of people say, "Oh, Buddhism, Hinduism, like all of it must be pantheism." It's like, I don't know. And I started looking into some of the primary sources, and I see some monotheist philosophy in there actually.
It I was just gonna say, when you talk about it coming from China, like, are you talking about, like, Taoism, or what is your thought on I mean, Taoism is very pantheistic, right? It's the worship
Yes.
of everything, and it's all one, essentially, and it's also
Yes.
the unity of opposites, right? The yin yang,
Yes,
so
the dialectic. I'd argue the
yeah,
dialectic methodology came from China and then went to India, and that's when India became pantheistic.
yeah.
And because India is not like either Indians just didn't really see fit to record a lot of things, or you had a lot of book burnings. I kind of think it was more they had a lot of book burnings, and we just don't have much history from there. But yeah, it so
The Tao
this
Tao
becomes
Fu. Yeah.
this becomes speculative because there's no record of it. But
Right.
I am skeptical of the narrative that pantheism just came from India and the Indians developed it. I actually think it came from China. And look now in
But
current times.
Taoism is very pantheistic. So I mean that makes sense.
Well, and also, so I would say China was propped up to get the level they are now, but China so people say, "Oh, look, you had the Nixon deals, you had the Rockefeller deals, you had the British opium lords like Russell prop up
Mhm.
the Chinese." It's like, yeah, that's true, but then they'll say, "Oh, well, that means China is just a puppet nation. They're all puppets." It's like, I mean, maybe that's true. I haven't looked enough into China, but it's actually very plausible to me that the people at the top of China are at the top of the global power structure because they have dialectics down. It's like much of this power system, it's not as much about organizational hierarchy because the top levels of power, it's not a formal group. It's more of an informal group, and it's more based on methodology than anything
It's
else.
me-
So it's like
it's
China, yeah,
tactics and methods. Yeah.
but China. So with Europe, it's like you could argue that the same ruling class, the same dynasty has been here for a while, but they haven't had a continuous civilization like China has. And yeah, they China knows how to play dialectic tricks very well. Yeah.
Yes. They've got that down. Yeah. And they're so smooth about it. I mean, I think that, Western culture largely, I don't mean to be pejorative, but I think the education's been dumbed down so much that the dialectics are actually pretty obvious if you're looking for it, but a lot of people don't see them. Whereas China, I feel like deploys them with much more, fluidity. It's much more graceful. So it's actually harder to discern because they're much more skilled at it.
Well, yeah, now they're exporting it. Now they're exporting it worldwide. It's like literally every single government right now is infested with Chinese spies. And when a lot of people talk about like, oh well, you're just going off this China Fox News talking points. So it's like you do have some people muddying the waters. There's discourse. Then when
Yeah.
serious people start bringing it up, they're like, "Oh, come on, let's talk about Mossad or something. Let's Chinese spies. We obviously know they're not actually running things, and then just people just kind of forget about it. But I think that's a mistake.
Yes. Well, and, that would be great dialectical tactics, wouldn't it be? You muddy the water. That's exactly how disinformation works, right? They keep pumping it so that it discredits it. And I do
Well,
think that there is, like, this whole boogeyman narrative, which I don't think is actually accurate because it misdirects from where the tactics are actually being deployed, right?
Well, yeah, and just really another one that I think is pretty big because you have like the Democrats would fear monger over Russia, but there actually is some pretty serious power players from Russia. It's like there's entire segments of New York where after Giuliani and Trump helped supposedly clean up New York and get the Gambino crime syndicate out there, immediately the Russian mafia came in and took their place. And a way you can know it's still the same power structure even though it's different ethnicities because so the Gambinos, Gotti, they were being taxed with money laundry through the Lucchese crime family, Sicilian. Well, the Russians are still being taxed by Sicilians. People say, "Oh, the Sicilian mafia is not really relevant. They're going away." Like no, like they're just more hidden. They're more institutionalized. So it looks like they've been going away, but they've even captured the Italy's police force. But yeah, this is a little bit off topic, but I just wanted to point out that the dialectic methodology, I'd argue, has been being used by China the most, and now they're caught up technologically. They're serious players, and they tend to be left out of these conversations. So this
Well,
is this is going.
yeah, it's okay. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Well, no, so I do follow the Genesis 11 narrative that it did come from Babylon ultimately. So I think there was a event which is actually you see hints of this in the
So, sorry,
Mesopotamian kings list.
before you go on into that, because I thought you were gonna continue that thread. I just wanna interject really quickly with this, with both when you're bringing up China and Russia, I think it's worth noting that they're both like, they have, aristocracy, so they're the dynastic families carry through. That's very different from, like, I mean, you've got the royalty in, Great Britain, but it's a much more kind of public royalty, whereas, and I know it's like celebrity, but I'm just saying, like, China and Russia, they do have these dynastic families largely who aren't even known. Like, we don't have all the names of all of them, so that would be a great way to be able to, like, wield this power and carry it through generations and
Yep.
teach the tactics, right? That's what it's about. It's about how can you, inculcate the next generation with with this ideology, with this tactic, with the worldview, and that would be a way to do it, so.
Well, also, yeah, I'll just put with regards to these tactics and methods, like communism is just another facelift of this
Yes.
old method. So that's why China accepted communism so readily. It's because they already had the basic building blocks, and also just the way China's agriculture is set up to where they easily get surplus crops, be able to feed people. It's like a system like that. You can have a distribution kind of centralized government system actually work better than other places. So that's another thing that tends to get overlooked. People argue about why communism kind of seemed to quote unquote work in China, where
Mhm.
it's not the most efficient, but a lot of people will muddy the waters and try to compare China like you're talking about other places when there's so many variables that get left out. But yeah, I'd say the origin for this would be the plains of Shinar, Genesis 11. So what I was getting out the Mesopotamian kings list is there are exaggerations because the first few kings in the Mesopotamian list, they say they lived for 20,000 years or something like that. But in the Genesis account, you have people living quite long lifespans. So the best conclusion I could come to is that for whatever reason, maybe it was the atmosphere, maybe it was oxygen levels, maybe it was the fact that genetics have been watered down and just deteriorating over time. But for whatever reason, it does seem like those first few people were living much longer. So
Yeah, like
it makes
1,000
sense.
years,
It makes sense.
millennia.
So think about it like this, because once you start getting great times five grandkid, the lifespan start going down 300. Another few generations, it goes down to 120. So
Yeah,
these people who are living super long, they'd they'd be outliving their great times 12 grandkids. So it's pretty easy to see how tall tales would be spread and how they'd be slowly deified. So when you're looking at the Mesopotamian kings list and you're seeing kings being listed as living 2,000 years, not 2,000, 20,000 years, I think that's the step before it's like, oh wait, no, Japheth was actually Zeus. He's not called Japheth anymore, and you have this weird kind of mythos where you have like these gods are kind of like humans versus these extraterrestrial kind of gods, which I think that's sort of a retelling of the Genesis 6 account in the ancient memory that's been remythified. But yeah, Babylon was the first attempt at a world government, but it was more localized. It was more like you only had a world population of about 5,000 people, and
they didn't have the
from
internet.
there, from there, from there, it's dispersed. And I'd say after that, China was the first one to develop pantheism, but you still had people working at these methodologies of initiation, infiltration to try because they're like, well, wait a second, we had this Babel project broken apart. Let's try and organize to redo it. So I think what you had multiple regions try and go back to that. You had some people believing in it, some people like, oh, wait a second, we messed up, and then later on through time, you have people who are in on the same kind of project rejoining at various points in time throughout the world. So this is what Cooper says. The
Okay.
Babylonian religion is usually met with much criticism and derision by those who believe that it was a terrible institution. Well, also, I'll just point out that if you start going back to the Babylonian religion, people say, "Oh, you're drawing way too many parallels," and I do agree. I think people do sometimes try to draw too many parallels and just reduce everything to Nimrod. Nimrod becomes like the demiurge, where every institution that's bad, it ultimately has its roots with him. That can happen, but there is some balance to this. The mysteries definitely came from the East, and the East and the mystery still survives today. And that's why I brought up China, because I actually think
Mhm.
that's China, not India. When one Freemason greets another, and he is not sure if he is really a Freemason, he will ask if he is a traveler, or if he is traveling, or if he is a fellow traveler. I might add, the same code of identification is used by the Communist Party in this country, because communism and the mysteries are the same entity as are socialism and the mysteries. So I'll just point out really quick there. So one of the ideals of Freemasonry is fraternity. So that's why you have communists also call each other comrades. You're seeing a
Mm.
repackaging of the Masonic fraternity. It's just a more atheistic system, whereas in Freemasonry you're required to assert belief in a supreme
Sure.
being, but it's the same origins though. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So yeah, that's the process. The process for this is what we were talking about earlier, with it starting out as being monotheism. It starts out being, well, hey, we don't trust God. Let's try and make the system to where we can't get flooded. So what I think Babel ultimately was, I think it was also generational trauma from the flood and anxiety and trying to take matters into their own hands. So I don't think it was pantheistic at the time. I don't think the doctrines had developed the point where they have now. But this goes back to Cooper when he talks about how this developed into degrees of initiation that can be used to control people. So he's talking about these fellow travelers talking to each other. That's the context of this. So when they meet and this exchange takes place, the one being queried if he is indeed a member of the mystery religion will say, yes, I am a traveler, to which the first or the inquirer will respond with, where are you going? Or where are you traveling from to where? And he will answer, from west to east. And remember what I said about eastern wind also. I think there's a reason for this. For the east is the position of the rising sun, where the knowledge comes from, you see. From an early history, it certainly can be proven to have come from the east. And the sun was the symbol of the intellect. It began by being the symbol of the unseen God of the universe and slowly transformed to the symbol of intellect, the light, Osiris, and Lucifer, the light bringer. So, what I think is going on there actually is it makes
Like
sense why the
Ra.
sun would.
Ra is the sun god. Yeah.
Yeah, well, before it was Ra, though, before it was Ra, the sun would be seen as a symbol of divinity because the sun gives life. The sun, in terms of everything we observe, it seems to be the most eternal thing. It's like the world we live on, like there's weather, there's day and night, there's change, but the sun doesn't change. So it makes perfect sense that it would be seen as a stand or a symbol for God for those early people. But like you said earlier, the creation became the thing that was worshipped, and from there you kept on having all these deteriorations and retcons. So it's instead of the sun being a representative of God Himself, you end up getting, it starts off with henotheism. So the sun god, he's the chief god, but he's not completely infinite. He's not completely omnipresent, omnipotent, and then other of God's attributes. So they'd have representatives of God's attributes and other symbols. Like what's the lotus? What's the lotus stand for? Because I'm pretty sure that's one of them. So what's the lotus stand for?
It's
That
supposed
you
to be
used in
like
the show?
rebirth and peace. That's what the Eastern mysticism, yeah. Rebirth and peace.
Well, yeah, but there just a lot of these symbols will just refer to abstract sort of
Mhm.
universal categories like
Yeah.
the holding the scales, justice. Then you have Lady Justice, Lady Columbia, which I'd argue is more of a retcon of Lady Sophia and Athena. Oh yeah, the goddess of wisdom. It's like, yeah, oh yeah, I have the goddess of wisdom, goddess of, it's like, oh yeah, Venus, goddess of beauty. all those things are attributes of God, but you have them being split off into different objects of worship. It becomes compartmentalized,
Right.
and then from it's like the pantheism comes there. People start reasoning like, wait a second, all these things must be aspects of the same being. But instead of saying, oh well, let's go back to monotheism, what they say is, well, that's because everything is an expression of the one. So
Mhm.
it ends up getting transitioned into pantheism. So one thing that comes up a lot in these when you start reading into esoteric books about what these esoteric people believe, you see microcosm, macrocosm
Yeah.
distinctions. So I'm talking about earlier where you have meditation, and then people found that those meditative methodologies can be used to brainwash people and control them. Once you look inwardly, especially when you're on drugs, oh, yeah,
Okay.
especially psychedelics like mushrooms, you have something called sensory overlap called synesthesia, where you perceive if you're hearing something, your sight perceives the hearing as fractal visuals. It almost looks like you can see your own mind processing its thought and processing how you take in sense data. And it looks like you're actually observing this kind of fractal set that resembles the universe. Because I remember when I was tripping, when I used to do this kind of thing, I was thinking, wait a second, I'm experiencing God right now. There's nothing more divine in this. It was a very imminent experience, and I had these pantheistic thoughts.
Sure.
So yeah, so this is a I'm
I think
transitioning.
that's the purpose of the popularization of these types of drugs.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm getting the hashishine also because the hashishine
Yes.
explicitly used because I think there were people using drugs to brainwash people before the hashishine, the Order of the Assassins, but
Yeah.
there's actual documentation there where there's not much documentation this in ancient. We know it was used for ceremonies, but explicit MK Ultra, it's like you have to read those MK Ultra methods into history. It's like there's no explicit proof. It's like if
Right.
you accept the kind of framework I'm giving and you think there's proof for the framework, it's like that is indirect, but it's not the same thing as there actually being a primary source documenting it.
Right. Right. But the
So
Hashishins,
on
definitely. Yeah.
well, yeah, so on to the initiation. So prayer, fasting, and study were the first requirements when the Indian candidate prepared himself for the trials which are before him. So the trials which Cooper is writing about, they're pretty much designed to get people to stop trusting their senses, stop trusting their intuition,
Mm,
and essentially make themselves dependent on the kind of hierarchy they're attaching themselves to. Now, when it came to these Indian initiations, I don't think it was as much these conspiratorial assassin type secret societies, but this stuff would spread to Egypt and Greece. And yeah, like you heard about where people studied under Plato out of the academy and they came out and assassinated people in other city states. Like,
right.
yeah, it's like, yeah, I definitely think you had order the assassin stuff going on back then in ancient Greek, and Plato was actually like a really high level power player.
Yeah. I would say
Yeah.
so.
So Cooper goes back. So this is where I'm getting out the repetition. So while he
I mean,
repeated
I'll
prayer,
just add one thing to that. Like, they let Plato have an academy. I don't think people really think about that. Like, so what he was doing is he was, ostensibly, bringing education, like high level education, true foundational, the trivium, the quadrivium, to the masses. I mean, yes, there was a, entry point, but it was a meritocratic as opposed to aristocratic, right? Typically, it was only the aristocrats who could be educated. And so what he was doing was creating a different system. But if you think about that, the fact that he was allowed to do that, I mean, they had oligarchies back then, right? It's kind of a big deal. I don't think people think about that way, but it's really it's telling.
Well, and then you had that system spread out to Persia, and you had it spread it to Italy. Like
Yeah.
at the exact same time, you had that system come up in Athens. 1 year later, you had it come up in Rome, and
Yep.
that was the same time Pythagoras was still alive after Pythagoras was kicked
Yep.
out of Calabria too. So there's yeah, it's like a lot of this is speculative because like we don't have documentation of a lot of
Yep.
this stuff. Once you look at this, it's like wait a second, what's going on here? And you start looking at similar things going on in time periods. There are more documentation. Like, wait, the Hashashin were doing this. Okay, like there's probably the same hierarchy here that's active at the same time. And yeah,
Yeah.
so this is what Cooper's talking about, the methodology to superimpose another belief structure on someone's previous worldview to make them, because the goal is to make them depend on the master, make them perfect soldiers, make them perfectly compliant, and the initiates who can't make that, they get killed. And that's what they want to do with the entire planet. So if you can't handle the social initiation they're trying to implement worldwide, you're a useless eater. So into the body liquidizer you go, and you'll get fed back in the circular economy. Like it's so bad.
Yeah.
So while he repeated prayers and repetitions, which included the invocation for his complete conversion. So yeah, when you go into these repetitive mantras, part of it is desire for you to be converted. We'll convert into what? It's like they're being initiated to into is secret societies, so they don't even know the kind of propositions they're going to have to accept because they haven't made those degrees. So it's pretty much like I'm going to ask my conversion so I can just become putty in the hands of my master. Like that doesn't that sound kind of like the Jesuit oaths right
Yep.
there? Yeah, that
Yeah.
shows you where that came from. So coupled with the words, so they'd have different kind of mantras. Like there are words for this. Like there'd be Om, but there'd be other kind of mantras and maybe Sanskrit type languages. I can't pronounce it. So which is given during the ceremonies. It means that the power of suggestion was being applied continuously and should penetrate into the mind at every moment when it is able to receive it. So one thing I'll also note is when people are being brainwashed initiated, it's a very all-encompassing sensory type experience. There's music to it. A lot of times there's naked girls, there's temptations of lust, and there's obviously drugs brought in, and sometimes there's even degrees of pain where people will go through torture and then they'll be brought into a
Trauma-based
state
mind
of
control. Yeah.
yeah,
Trauma-based
the,
mind control. Yeah.
it's trauma-based mind control, and then but then after they go through the torture, they get offered respite and bliss, and then they're brought into a state of ecstasy. So it's like their brain starts being rewired into associating everything they want with the hierarchy that just did all this horrible stuff to them, and that's actively deceiving them. Yeah, it's a very dangerous kind of system. It's like
Yeah.
once you have people radicalized and buying into a system like this, it's a very dangerous and unaccounted for thing because you can't appeal to these people's self-interest because they're taught to believe that their self-interest is bad and their ego is bad. So
Right.
therefore I'm just going to submit it to my master, and they don't have any loyalties to anything real or legitimate except for the hierarchy.
Right. Well, because they believe they're just part of the one, right? All is one.
Yeah.
All is one. All is the mind. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and but their group has the secret to it, so everyone else is unaware of the illusion of separation. They're unaware that they are actually part of God, knowing himself. So the people who see the divine pattern, that means they're therefore entitled to do whatever they want to the people that
Mhm.
don't have the awakened God spark. They're not as human as they are. That's actually how these people see the world. It's very dangerous. Oh yeah, you hear Yuval Noah Harari talk about this. Like I posted a clip on Twitter where Yuval Noah Harari that's like I'd say that was actually Klaus Schwab's handler. Some people would say that's Klaus Schwab's right hand man. I think Yuval Noah Harari was actually above Klaus Schwab, but he said one of the most pressing problems of the 21st century is what are we going to do with all these worthless human beings? And you can in that video I posted, you can hear a woman gasp in the background like it's like she's hearing something awful, but the way he said it just so flippantly, like, what he's
It's
saying
like
is the
George Bernard Shaw, right? When he's like, "Oh, yeah, these useless cedars," I mean, and he says it, like, in this very fairy, wispy, but he's talking about culling people. Barbara Marx Hubbard, too. I've got a clip of her talking about, I mean, how she says a fourth of the planet needs to be culled because, they're not spiritually evolved enough. You have to evolve or die. It's the ones who are selfish and, they don't have the empathy. They're gonna have to go. Yeah, and in one of these clips, she's talking about how, I don't know if it was a slip or not, but she talks about eating babies. But yeah, they say all these things. It's very, and yeah, but they say it like just very casually, as if it's, yeah, no big deal. Yeah,
looks evil. She looks evil.
I know. Her planetary grin. She talks about the planetary grin, but her grin is, yeah, it doesn't feel quite, it feels evil. Yeah. But yeah,
Well,
you're seeing so all of the things that you're talking about, I think it's really important because you're talking about ancient times, right? Thousands of years ago, but we see this today. And I keep talking about how what we're seeing with this technocratic movement, the dialectic between Game B and the Dark Enlightenment, they both have the same premises. It's just that one operates through the left hand path, one operates through the right hand path. So they're using different archetypes to appeal to a different audience, but it's the same message that you're talking about with Yuval Noah Harari.
well, yeah, and then it's like the the Democrat Party and the Nazis really aren't that different. They both came out of the Theosophic Society, actually. Oh yeah,
Exactly.
by the what? Oh, so okay. So what's funny, really quick though, is this is a little bit off topic, but so I've posted about this on Twitter before, but you have the Democrats were the ones who were scared of the Nazis and talking against the Nazis, where the Republicans are the ones talking against the communists. But guess what? The neoconservatives were created by Trotskyite Jews working with Opus Dei Catholics,
Yeah.
but the Democrat neoliberalism, that was paperclip Nazis. So you had a switcheroo. So the very people who both those sides were freaking out about were the ones actually pushing the witch hunt against those very groups that they were a part of. It's
Uh-huh.
kinda like when a homosexual takes over a country, the open gays are the first to be killed. It's like
Right.
it's just it's kind of funny how that works.
Well,
But
the
yeah,
best
so
way to control the opposition is to lead it, So
yeah, yeah. But then so that Margaret Sanger and Hitler are both part of the same Theosophic secret society where they taught that the people who accept their precepts are gonna become the master race, and they wouldn't always explicitly teach like this master race is genetic, but what they teach is that spiritual awakening. But then the spiritual awakening affects your genetics. So then the kind of people who have the right spiritual awakening over time develop blonde hair, blue eyes, and blacks. They just don't have it. They gotta go. So that's why Margaret Sanger put abortion clinics in black neighborhoods. Then Hitler's whole genocide, like rather talking about the Holocaust. No matter how many people, I think it happened. I'm not entirely sure about the numbers just because there's so many different arguments out there. It's like I haven't had time to wade through it, but it definitely happened. But even with that aside, with just how many people died in World War II and how he targets certain population centers, he was trying to cull the world of souls that aren't ready to ascend to the next level because he's part of the same cult. Same thing with Stalin. Mao actually had an ethnic bent to the kind of populations he'd starve and
yeah.
target also. So all these people who target certain demographics for genocide, they're part of the same thing. Oh, and I'll point out another one. It's so because there is a genetic component. Like these people hate black people. They definitely hate Ashkenazi Jews. I'm convinced of that. I'm definitely convinced of that. Like because the people say, oh, it's Ashkenazi. They'll say, oh, replacement migration. That's Ashkenazi Jews trying to get rid of white people. But the Ashkenazi Jews are on the chopping block too. It's
Oh, yeah.
pretty obvious,
So
but
obvious.
like for so people might be saying, wait, you're talking about a bunch of white people. Why would they want to go after other white people? It's because certain cultures don't accept the precepts. Certain cultures can't be socially engineered. So look at Appalachia in the South. Those demographics have the kind of the Scottish culture that came to the Americas. So Scotland, in a lot of ways, developed liberalism just as much as England did, and
Sure.
I'd say it's more good and robust kind of liberalism, just
Yeah.
what you get from
Scottish
John Locke.
Enlightenment.
So those demographics, because okay, so America was a frontier civilization. So if there's a frontier civilization that's a colony of a prior civilization, the frontier civilizations become more of the essence of what the previous civilization was. So there's a sense in which my part of the country in Appalachia are more Scottish liberal and more British liberal than Britain and Scotland were.
Hmm.
We take those ideas to more extremes than those two countries ever did. So
Yeah.
look at Appalachia being flooded with fentanyl. They have I've even run into like what I'm pretty sure was a communist spy flinging fentanyl around. She looked Chinese and had a Chinese accent. And she was working with the cartels in my area, and also the Corsican mafia is here. Also, I saw the Corsican mafia come into my part of the country in 2015, back when I was still in high school, because the son of a cadre came to my school, and I was actually like became his wheels because he was 15 and couldn't drive, but he was still already experienced with extorting people. So I saw some pretty crazy stuff in college. But yeah, like what this all is it's deliberate cultural destruction, and it's a form of soft genocide. And yeah, also the pharmaceutical industry. It's like you have what I'd consider to be malpractice that's legally protected because our medical industry is literally a mafia extortion racket.
I think it's
I,
just a
I
rebranding of the East Indian British Company. I mean, that's what
yeah.
created the insurance companies, right? And it was to protect their whole cartel operation, which back then the drugs were like, you know, like coffee, teas, and opium and cocaine. But today, it's the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, we've got a black market for all the other stuff, but it's essentially, and now you've got the insurance companies, right, working to protect big pharma. I think it's just a
Well, no,
rebranding. It's just a reoperation, repackage.
well, they're really going after the South, though. They're really going after the South, like
Mm,
more so than I see other demographics. It's pretty bad over here. And
no.
oh yeah, the education here too. It's pretty much on every single front. So it's not just this. But let's go after certain races. Like there's a cultural component to it also. They target certain cultural variables also.
Yeah.
But
I was
yeah,
gonna
so
add when you were talking about all of the like Margaret Sanger, Annie Besant was part of this whole Planned Parenthood, and she was also one of the co-founders of the Malthusian League. So it's the same ideology, right? The same worldview that we've got to cull the useless leaders because there's not enough resources to go around. So yeah, and she was also, Theosophical Society. Yeah,
Sanger and Hitler were Theosophic Society too. Yeah, literally.
yeah. Sanger was
Just
too.
yeah, Sanger was blatantly taught by Blavatsky. Like since Hitler read Blavatsky and quoted him a lot, I've heard a lot of people say Hitler was a disciple. It's like, well, indirect in the
Hitler
sense that
had
you could
the
call.
secret doctrine on his nightstand.
Well, but
Yeah.
Hitler never actually knew her, whereas Margaret Sanger actually did.
Right,
So,
right. That's the difference.
like
But
no,
yeah,
Margaret.
Annie Besant co-founded the Planned Parenthood, but she was a co-Freemason. She was also the founder of the Malthusian League and a Fabian. So,
Planned Parenthood, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Also, it's absolutely part of the calling because they go after black demographics specifically. I mean, Margaret Sanger gave speeches to the Ku Klux Klan about eugenics favorably. It's like she's as racist as it gets. Um,
yeah.
yeah, but who's that on the screen?
I don't know actually. Oh, is that Annie Besant? Yeah, yeah, it's Annie Besant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, because I've seen okay, 'cause
I,
I've
I've
seen her
seen
on
younger
Twitter.
pictures of her. I haven't seen that one.
No,
But yeah,
I've seen pictures of her on Twitter posts, so it's all right, now I have a face to it. Yeah,
yeah.
because there's just so many of these names, it's kinda
Most of
hard to
the
keep up
Sure, it's
with.
hard to keep the face and the name with all the names. Most of the pictures I've seen of her, she was young. Yeah, like that's what I envision her more like. Okay, but yeah, so interestingly enough, Annie Besant, Madame Blavatsky, and Alice Bailey were all co-Freemasons. Right, so it's very rare because it's a male fraternity, but there was the co-Freemasons, and there were women in the co-Freemasons, and
Well,
Alice Bailey was married to Foster Bailey, who was a high
well,
level.
it's just like how monastic orders and orders of chivalry accept men, but they have sisterhoods too. That's how it is. Because like, in in Freemasonry, it won't be called Scottish Rite, but there will be a sisterhood version. I forgot what it's called, but
There's
then
the
there's
Order of
other
the
ones.
Eastern Star.
Well, bowl society, for instance, so Boule.
Yeah.
So people will sometimes confuse that with Prince Hall Rite because a lot of the black bowl masons
Mhm.
are also Prince Hall Rite
Right.
masons, but they're not the same thing. But bowl society actually admits women, and they recruit through college fraternities, especially these.
Yeah.
If you see like a big black woman's fraternity, especially at a school like Stanford or something, that's often bowl society, which
Right.
yeah.
Is it pronounced
Uh,
bowl? I thought it was boule.
Boule,
Yeah.
Boule, and
I
those are the
I always
guys.
say
Yeah,
boule, but you might be right. It might be bowl.
Boule. Okay, no,
I
oh
always
no,
say
no,
boule.
Boule. No, Boule sounds right. No, I'm
Okay.
really bad at
Okay.
pronouncing things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but Boule, they're those are the black masons that are actually active in my area. I know for a fact that
Oh,
they recruit out of homeless shelters here. I've actually seen it like
whoa.
firsthand. Yeah, and they recruit out of prisons too. It's kind of
Yes.
like
That I
if you
know.
see the movie
And a
Shot
lot of
Caller, have you seen
the rap industry. A lot of the rap industry is tied to boule.
P Diddy is pretty high up in Boule,
Oh, interesting.
and
I
yeah,
don't I haven't seen that confirmed, but I've definitely seen that speculated. So yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
yeah. Well, yeah, oh, yeah. Then, like all this is connected because rap
Yeah.
rap is actually part of this whole methodology of initiating and overriding people's worldview, especially to go these concerts. Like you have all the components, you have sensory overload, you have repetition. Oh, if you listen to some of the rap that comes out now, it's like okay, Run DMC Sugar Hill Game. You people might not like that music, but it's actually music. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course it
I've
is.
seen it alleged. I just didn't know that it was confirmed. But okay, there we go. It's alleged
Yeah,
for yeah.
no, yeah, yeah, but like, listen to the rap coming out n like, I get so annoyed because the kind of people that like this stuff, it's the people my age, it's people in their late to early 20s. I don't even know what the teenagers now are listening to. I don't even want to, but when I'd be in college and high school, I'd be listening to this mumble rap where it's like the lyrics be like, "Hey, this your fucking bitch, huh? That's what some folks from what, huh?" Like, it's not even like, you've heard those songs I'm talking about, right? Where it's, like, not
Oh yeah,
even you can't even understand what they're saying, and there's just
you have
some
no clue.
repetitive beat.
And then when you
Yeah,
can, it's like curse words. Yeah, it's yeah.
well, yeah, like, how yeah, it's not I don't know how anyone can even enjoy it. Like, what kind of level of social conditioning do you have to get to where you even think that's music?
Right, right. I know. It's very degenerate. Yeah,
Well, yeah,
debate.
so well, yeah, so just this segues back into what I was reading with Cooper, though, because they
Yep.
they initiate through nonsense like this and sensory overload. So this is actually going back thousands of years ago. So
Yeah.
passing through a tunnel of complete darkness. Earlier from what I was copying pasting it from, he actually talks about how they use pyramids to do this. So Adam Weishaupt actually, before he created the Bavarian Illuminati, he was actually initiated in Egypt with the pyramids with they call it Colmar. So if you look into this, a lot of people will brush it off. It's like, wait, like Colmar, it's saying that he's this crypto Jew, and so people who are a little bit sensitive to that will be like, oh, that's just crap. But what's really going on is Colmar is actually the Duke of Lorraine, Charles de Lorraine. He was the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire who married Maria Therese the Habsburg. He's the brother of the Lorraine family that married into Habsburg, and then his nephew Maximilian Habsburg, who would be third the third son. So he never would actually be a Holy Roman Emperor. He'd be more of secondary nobility. He became the Grand Master of the Teutonic Knights also. So the Teutonic Knights were the ones who actually created the Bavarian Illuminati in the background
Right.
alongside the Jesuit order. So Adam Weishaupt went through one of these initiations over there. So yeah, Charles the Fifth, the Duke of Lorraine.
Fourth.
Yep. It would be Charles Lorraine. Yep. So, passing through the darkness, the initiate emerged into the cavern where three priests dressed as gods awaited him in repleasant and intimidating array. So there you have the overwhelming aesthetics, like
Mm.
everything's got to be over the top. After being addressed and partaking in the adoration of prayers, the initiate walked rapidly around the temple several times. So they make you go through this pointless, tedious stuff just to be used to inconveniencing yourself and making you uncomfortable because the whole discomfort part of it is a part of the process. And was then carried through several subterranean and unit caves, unlit caves. So yeah, it goes from sensory overload to sensory deprivation. They go between those two extremes quite a bit. During this time, there were wails and shouts from every side, while illuminated specters and other horrors abounded. So that use smoke and mirrors. At
Mhm.
the end of this terrible experience, the aspirant came to two doors, which, when opened to the sound of the sacred conch, or a shell, like you blow into a shell and make a trumpet, the conch revealed a scene of brilliance and glory. This hall was full of every delight in the form of pictures, music, perfume. The initiate walked to the altar in the room a where he was again harangued and presented with his sevenfold cord, which was marked as passing through the initiation. Now, if we compare these proceedings with those that were said to be carried among the Egyptians, the parallelism is startling even today. Okay, he talks about the Egyptians using this too, but that's because he was talking about Mithraism, and the Egyptians use the same ceremony. So yeah, a lot of this comes from sun worship, Mithra, like we were saying earlier. The parallelism is startling even today. The candidate was taken to a well, which he had to descend until it came to a tunnel. With a torch in hand, he passed through a door which closed to resounding noises. He was met by frightful figures which offered him a last chance of going back. So it's this sense of ultimate destiny, like all this stuff is to get people to have a sense of just this ultimateness, like they're having this ultimate experience, like they're the chosen one. Because what comes after this is, if you go through these initiations, you have a messiah complex, but your messiah complex is attached to the hierarchy. It's not even it's so yeah, there's pride, ego, and vanity to it, but there's a death to self component at the same time. It's paradoxical. So if you listen to what they believe, it can actually sound humble, like, oh yeah, I'm against
Oh.
ego, but it no, it's
Well, Weishaupt
that's
even talks about, part of the reason he said that he got the hierarchical structure from, the Jesuits, and that's what he modeled it after, and he said that he used secrecy because the secrecy was the clout that would make people feel bought in, it made them feel special, right? So that was a way
well, yeah,
to
yeah.
create that, yeah. So, but that's
Well, he
pride, right? That even
well,
though they're
also
coming they're feigning humility, but that's actually pride.
so Adam Weishaupt was a Jesuit the whole time,
Yeah.
but the Jesuit order was suppressed 1773. He was at Ingolstadt teaching canon
Yep,
law, which only Jesuits can do. So
yep,
Jesuit order suppressed. A Jesuit order suppressed. Hey, in 1773, same year we're suppressed. I'm going to become a Protestant. I don't believe that for a second. And he so just going back to the countering the nonsense narratives you hear about that, it's like I saw someone comment on your video last time about, oh well, the Jesuits are just this monastic order, like they're not doing, it's like, no, these guys are sworn to secrecies. On outer levels they might do some legitimate stuff. You might have
sure,
some Jesuits who don't know anything about this,
sure.
similar to how my grandma's husband, not my grandpa, he was a Shriner. It's like you can have Shriners doing criminal things, but a lot of Shriners actually do good things. That's actually possible. You can have decent Freemasons.
Of course.
It's it's the same thing
Like
going on
the
here.
circles, right? The rings on rings. So, yeah, you have
And that's one
people.
of Adam. Yeah, and Adam Weishaupt's symbol is a circle with a dot in the middle, and he
Yep,
constantly alludes to rings and ring. Like even Adam Weishaupt explains it. So, but that's not only the Jesuit order. There's also the German Teutonic Knights. So
sure.
when he's going to secondary nobility, so what what one of the main orders of chivalry, secondary nobles who don't inherit any titles do is they go to the Teutonic Knights. So you have these kind of resentful people of their older brothers all getting together, but still have these crazy intelligence networks. And that can be a pretty dangerous thing. So
Yeah.
in Habsburg, Lorraine, these German nobility, Holy Roman Emperor families, they're the core of it all, and they're also the core of the Jesuit order because like they're Farnesy and Borgia were one of the creators, but Borgia intermarried into Bourbon, Farnesy intermarried into Bourbon, and then like they're all these guys, the core of the Jesuit order, are all extended family, and that applies to German Teutonic Knights. So we're even though we're looking at different orders, we're all looking at the same power structure, and you have both those power structures attached to the same families, both coming into the Illuminati also. And then what's interesting with the French Revolution is you have people from the same families getting killed because they're eliminating loose ends who won't go along with it because because what the Illuminati is about bringing on a new world order. But when you have nobles who are benefiting from the old order and want to keep it that way, they got to go out of the way.
Of course.
So yeah, yeah, and also the Pope. So the Pope who suppressed the Jesuit order at this time, he was poisoned and killed too. None of this is a coincidence whatsoever. But yeah, going back to the initiation. So after he was offered a chance to go back, you get the sense that you're reaching your ultimate destiny. He passed through a fire, a swarm through a dangerous underground stream, and as soon as he reached the door and touched a ring to open it, a blast of air blew out the lamp, which gave him the only available light. Some type of machine swung him over a bottomless pit, and just as he was at the point of exhaustion, an ivory door opened, and he found himself on the threshold of a pleasant temple of Isis. Here, the priests received him into their company. He would go through a series of tests. He had to undergo fasting and what would now be called indoctrination before he could be considered completely initiated into even the first degree. The foregoing experiences were followed by the higher degrees of those of Seraphis and Osiris. So, yeah, and I just want to say one thing really quick about the Jesuit order before going on to this is that I'd say they're actually the core descendants of this entire mystery group um that goes back thousands of years. I mean, they're the ones that have the synthesis of all these methodologies that took place in Spain, and they have the educational institutions. They predate and were involved with the creation of the last. So that the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry were the original ones, but the ones fourth through 33rd, those were Jesuit created through Claremont College, and then later on, okay, Albert Pike. People will say Albert Pike, he was a know nothing anti-Catholic. Well, Albert Pike was kind of a nobody. Then he went to a Jesuit school in New Orleans, which, by the way, used to be Spanish territory. He went to a Jesuit institution for 7 years, and all of a sudden comes out this Masonic big shot and is going around all these big trafficking locations like Kansas City, and then later on Charleston, South Carolina, where he created the Paladin Rite that is openly satanic. So it's like none of these things are coincidental whatsoever.
Yeah, I
And
would agree.
by the way, when he becomes a know nothing anti Catholic, that's containment for that overall movement.
Yeah.
That's not it's like what you said.
It's a
The
way of
best way
shutting
to
down the conversation.
exactly.
Yeah.
So then another common tactic that you'll see them use is appeal to lust, appeal to degeneracy, but also they use that to test prospect initiates. So, sometimes they'll give you girls or kids to I'm not gonna say because it's graphic, and they'll hold that over your head. But other times they wanna see if because sometimes they'll do precepts where it's like, oh, if it's the wife of this high up person, you shouldn't touch her. But then, all right, so this is back to Bill Cooper's quote. And in the process, the wives of the priests would tease him and cajole him to try to get him to make love with them. And if he had successfully resisted, he could say that he passed all tests, But if he succumbed to their advances, he was not considered worthy. So there's different variations of this. It's not they don't always use the same kind of initiation methods the same way, but you still see repeating patterns where they definitely appeal to lust. So it is needless to outline the beliefs and methods used in Chinese, Japanese, South American, and other mysteries because while the legends which are inculcated may vary in some way, they all are essentially the same. And that's what I was getting at earlier. It's like there's variation in the methods, but still the ultimate thing going on. It's the same essence, it's just sort of different aesthetics.
Yeah.
The training hardly varies at all. The real mystery of mysteries is how and when man first discovered to use certain procedures to condition other men. And that's what Bill Cooper said. It's ultimately about being able to superimpose other worldviews and other priorities on people without them realizing it until they have so much cognitive dissonance, they're completely reliant on the person causing the cognitive dissonance to be able to get by with their lives. And
Yep.
to be able to look at themselves in the mirror, they have to be given missions and be doing ever increasingly extreme stuff and extreme power games. It's like it doesn't sound like a good life to live to me.
Not at all. Not at all. But that is how you brainwash people.
Well, yeah. So back to what we were saying about the heavens. So you know how we're going into the age of Aquarius now. Apparently, how
Moving
we're
out of
going from
Pisces to the age of Aquarius. Yes, Pisces is focused on the individual and it's too competitive. We need to move into the age of Aquarius, which is all collective and collaborative, and it's the water sign, so it's all fluid and we all become one. Yeah.
well, they frame it like it was the age of Christianity because Jesus is the ultimate representative of individualism, but that's more of a stage from individual actualization to collective actualization. So they try and use Christian language to appeal to Christian-minded people, and what they say is, "We're going from the age of the sun to the age of Pisces is the sun." They're like, "Oh, look, Jesus made these fish and Pisces, that's fish." And now we're going to age of Aquarius, and what they'll say is the age of Aquarius is actually the age of the Holy Spirit, but the Holy Spirit is something that's collective. It's like Hegel's it's like the
Yep.
Hegelian spirit, but
The Weltgeist.
it becomes
Weltgeist.
worse. It becomes worse because they claim that, okay, the people who have the gnosis, the people who know, the people who can see the heavenly pattern and know what's best for the rest of humanity, they'll frame it like that's Christ consciousness. You're
Uh-huh.
awakening to Christ consciousness, but once you actually awaken to Christ consciousness, you and other people, you are the incarnation of the Holy Spirit. It's about as blasphemous as it gets. Yeah, you've seen. They say collective awakening in Christ consciousness is the incarnation of the Holy Spirit, and once they can get everyone plugged into the new sphere and ascend to godhood, they are becoming the Holy Spirit, and that's coming to what Jesus said can't be forgiven, and that's blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. So it's like, some people argue like, hey, if you take the mark of the beast, can you actually be saved? It's like I'm starting to think maybe the mark of the beast has something to do with like if you take whatever that is, it's categorically blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. So it's like there you go.
Yeah, I think so. But I think that a lot of this, the age of Aquarius, the noosphere kind of concepts are being used in order to usher people into the beast system, right? So they do
Well, the
it, but
beast.
it's two-pronged, right? They I call it the technological immanentization of the eschaton, but in order to do that, they have, like, two approach again, dialectical. So, on the one hand, they convince you that we're already all one, all is, we're all interconnected, we're already in the noosphere. And so then what difference does it make if we have this technology that pushes us in it because we're already in it? Right? So, and then they have the top-down approach, which is we're gonna create the technology and, either force you or convince you to opt into, essentially it's gonna be opt into your own tyranny. But that's what I see, that if they're using this notion of the Aquarian age, the, noosphere to steer people into the beast system.
Well, What so that this also goes back to the whole sun worship aspect, is because they base these ages, so it's like first it was the age of Taurus, then it
Hmm.
became the goat age, it became the goat age, and then after the goat it was Pisces. So this is from Cooper, because this I brought this up because his thoughts are worth considering, and I just think it's worth adding the commentary to. So
Sure.
when the sun passed into the house of Pisces, or the two fish, the Christian era began, and we are on our way out of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And if you look at I'm going to be reading from this Knights Templar later, but I have a quote from Knights Templar talk about how it's the like, oh, you can think of the age of Aquarius as the age of the Holy Spirit. It's as blasphemous as it gets, but yeah, he's straight up a Knights Templar Grand Master, by the way. So that's about as close to a primary source in the secret society as you can get. So once you understand that the ancient religion was a religion of the worship of the heavens, then everything begins to come together. And when you understand that they ceased believing in an all-powerful, unseen God or hidden God of the universe and became essentially pantheists, believing everything is God, they call this nature or the natural way. So that goes back to what you're saying about them saying, "Oh, the new spheres are already here. We just want to actualize it. We're just." And by the way, the people who don't want to do it, they're not fit for collective ascension. So it's like they're in the way of our
Evolve
process
or
of becoming
die.
God. So, yeah, you're in the way of the process of becoming God. So once everyone left awake and become God, God's going to be thankful for you creating him. That's so blasphemous.
Yep.
So it's like or hidden God. No.
It's
So
spiritual eugenics. So they have like the genetic, biological eugenics and the technological eugenics, but that's spiritual eugenics. But it all funnels into the same thing.
well, and it comes down to gnosis, the worship of the intellect. It's because it's like that's the conclusion of all this, is like if it takes you have to have the gnosis, you have to have the secret knowledge to come to this. So it becomes that's where the Illuminati and the whole Promethean angle with Lucifer being the right light bringer to awaken your Christ consciousness comes. And so this is back super. Then you can understand how man came to worship the intellect. The intellect and a symbol of that can be used to represent the unseen God of the universe, to the use of which will bring man into a state of apotheosis, where man himself becomes God. So
Yeah.
that's the whole conclusion of,
Yeah.
if you believe that your Christ consciousness can make you realize there's no separation. We're all God experiencing Himself, and therefore you are God. And
You are.
but
Yeah.
we're not transcendent yet. So they inject that system. They inject. This is where the Jesuit Teilhard Chardin did, is he injected that into an evolutionary system. So another thing to look out for is, this is more popular in Protestant circles. So this Catholics don't have to deal with this, but there's something called process theology.
Yeah.
Very big. It's very big in Methodist circles right now. So the idea is that God, He can create things, but He's finite. He doesn't know the future, and He's not at a state of perfection yet. So there's a sense in which what the creature does affects God, and God affects the creature, but God doesn't use coercive power. He only uses persuasive power. So it's like, whenever we make good free will choices, we actually make God better. And then once we make God better, God's better at using non-coercive power to influence people. And you get that creature. It turns the creature and creator distinction into a Hegelian dialectic, and it just sort of updates. Yeah,
It's
yeah, that's
it's incredibly hubristic. I mean, it's basically Gnosticism, but without coming out overtly and saying that they believe in self-apotheosis. So they
well, yeah.
create that slight distinction to muddy the waters, but it's basically the same thing.
Well, the reason why I'm bringing it is
They're
it's like
co-creating is what they're doing, right? It's
all these
co-creation.
all these new things that well, they're not really new, but all these different labels coming out,
Right.
like, oh, communism. Oh wait, no, we don't have communism. We have black womanism. I had to read James Cone. I had to read Reverend James Cone Black Theology, where same system. It's just God aligns on the dialectic with the people on the oppressed side of the dialectic. So therefore Jesus is black, therefore God's black. And in this book, it was so blasphemous. Like, it was saying to accept Christ is to accept blackness and deny whiteness. to deny Christ, it's to deny blackness and accept whiteness. So it's like a lot of this stuff ends up being the most divisive stuff, and
Right.
it's all the exact same formula just plugged into different variables, and some of them come out to be more extremely racist. Like not all this ends up coming down to racism. It's like the kind of process theology be more branded for these kumbaya hippie neoliberal types who would be against racism, but they have this formula that's tailored to racist, white supremacists, black supremacists. It's like unless you have your worldview foundations thought through and you have discernment, it's pretty hard to not swallow this cult in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Yeah. And they, because it's infiltrated everything. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
infiltrated everywhere. Yeah. These tactics are also what Tavistock and sensitivity training. It's also the same kind of trauma-based mind control. Yeah.
Well, there's I'm not entirely sure about James Cone, but he is loosely related to Louis Farrakhan, who was Obama's chaplain. He's definitely a Tavistock plant. He definitely is for sure. But it's like I gotta wonder like what kind of circles James Cone was running, and also that James Cone, he's the black theology guy that I was talking about.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Interesting. Yeah.
oh yeah.
I don't.
Also, just really quick, this is a little off topic, but I saw someone compare James Cone's writings to Hitler's Mein Kampf, and it's almost like James Cone just cut and pasted from Hitler's Mein Kampf, but made white people the Jews, and black people were the Aryans that should be running things who were actually being suppressed by the Jews. It's like it was the exact same kind of formula Hitler used. It was just reworded,
Just
just like how
just inverted.
well,
Inverted.
just like how Karl Marx just pretty much cut and paste and reworded Adam Weishaupt and some of these other founding Illuminati members.
Well, he was commissioned. I mean, it was right, it was the League of the Just, League of Just Men, and they were like social justice warriors, and they became the League of the Outlaws, and then the offshoot from that was the Communist League. And it was Frederick Engels was the helm of that, and they had commissioned him to do a communist manifesto. And there's so much like there's I think I posted this actually on Twitter, on several places, where people have like excerpts showing that and accusing them of plagiarism. But I
No,
think they were commissioned to plagiarize. So
no, they
I
were they were
and
they
there's
were
actually phrases from Illuminati Manifesto, which is Adam Weishaupt, that are like almost word for word in the
well.
Communist
So
Manifesto.
before, what's funny? The communism was kind of like them throwing Jello at a wall to see what stuck because there were more rewrites of the Illuminati manifesto that completely flopped. It's like Bakunin came before that, and I think once his program failed, they just moved on to Marx. But they really tried making manifestos work, but it's like none of them picked up steam. It's like the people like, wait, you guys are meeting in secret. This is a bunch of nonsense. I'm actually satisfied with my life, so I don't need any of your hogwash. But Karl Marx, he he definitely plagiarized off other things, but I'm convinced the manifesto had at least four writers, and another one would be Moses Hess. Moses
Uh,
Hess created Reform Judaism, and then you had Peter Jambeck. So Peter Jambeck's he became the Black Pope 10 years after he helped ghostwrite the manifesto. He was actually teaching with Moses Hess at that place in Brussels before. So yeah, he was stationed in Rome, then he went to Brussels while Marx was there, then went back to Rome. So hardly anyone talks about that, but in a lot of ways, the Communist Manifesto was a
but they're
Jesuit creation,
documented.
just like
There is
just like how
documentation. Yeah.
yeah, just like how Adam Weishaupt was also. So yeah, that's why I said a Jesuit order in terms of formal hierarchy. The thing at the top I'd say isn't a formal hierarchy, but in terms of formal hierarchies, I do think the Jesuit order is the top one, and they're the drivers of the methodology. And they were even in China. They were like Mao.
Yeah.
I forgot I forgot the American journalist name, but when Mao was in China, he had an American journalist be his liaison for Mao and give Mao instructions, and Mao actually based his policy off Teilhard Chardin in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. I don't remember the journalist either. But Anthony Sutton
But
has
on my
definitely.
Twitter, yeah, it's on my. If you look at Mao or Chardin on my Twitter, you'll find it if you scroll down a couple of times. But yeah, like they're they have their hands in pretty much every pie.
And
But
where did you say you think that the Jesuits originated from? Because I mean, they're relatively new.
the Hashishim, the Order of the Assassins, and
Okay.
Almenbrados. Yeah.
Well, that would
But
make sense. Yeah.
that's actually where I was getting at. That's actually where I was getting at. So, yeah,
Okay.
like with Bill Cooper, we were talking about how it's apotheosis, but
Yeah.
that whole system. So it came before Spain. It came before Spain, but it came up into Spain where you had a mix of these kind of weird Germanic Visigoth offshoots that end up accepting Gnosticism in southern France and they're in northern Spain. They would be suppressed by the Inquisition. That you'd have Benedictine monks arguing against them, but it's kind of interesting because it's like these Gnostic groups. We don't have much of their writings because all their books were burnt, but we know they were organized into secret societies and they had something like an intelligence service, but also you had intelligence services based in Rome, like the Benedictine order opposing them. So, and it's completely not off the question that even something like the Benedictine order would be infiltrated by that same group pretty early on. But what you had in Spain is you had multiple of these strains. So you had those Gnostics in Northern Europe, those Germanics come in, but then through the Muslims, you had branches of the Order of Assassins and Hashashin
Mhm.
come in, and the Hashashin wasn't the first. There was something going on before the Hashashin. It's hard to find records of any
Right.
formal mention. It's like we know it's kind of like we know Plato is part of something, but we don't know what that thing was. Though I will say
Pythagoras gives a lot of indication. I mean, he definitely was tied in with Pythagorean.
with how far reaching goes pretty far back. So this is a mainstream history. This is a mainstream kind of hint. So it's well known that they had people from the inner Persian court go to Macedonia, go to King Philip, and
Right.
on the kind of recordings we have, it's framed like Alexander the Great was just being really clever as a kid. It's like, oh, Alexander the Great knew exactly what questions to ask, and these Persian officials fed Alexander the Great all this critical information about their infrastructure. And then right after that, he goes and trains with Aristotle, who had been part of the
Right.
same circle as play. Like I think that was absolutely orchestrated.
I think so too.
Then once he goes to Persia, the only people who die are peasants and soldiers, but all the governors keep their positions. Even the king of Persia, he pretty much just becomes an underruler, and the general, most of the like maybe a few of the generals got killed, but overall they all kept their positions. And he even goes out to India and he lets the Indian kings pretty much remain viceroys. But what you had spread was you had Plato's philosopher king ideology spread. So that could give you some hints on why they allowed Plato's academy to flourish to what
Yeah.
you were getting at
Why
earlier.
why do you
But
think what do you think the intention of having Alexander the Great mentor uh Aristotle?
or what do you think the intention of having Aristotle mentor Alexander the Great was?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's like a lot of times when you're talking about this de facto hierarchy, a lot of times philosophers are actually pretty high end, and philosophers, they're the guys who come up with methodologies. So
Well,
that's
and
what I
they're
think is how.
funded. Otherwise, you've never like the philosophers who philosophize and aren't funded, you have never heard of them. So
Yeah,
I always ask that. I'm like, why were these operating systems being propped up? They were serving something. There's a reason why, because philosophy is like an operating system, right? So why do we use, a Mac operating system versus a Windows operating system? It's because these are the ones that have been promulgated in through the marketplace essentially. But it's the same for the marketplace of ideas, right? There are various ones that are propped up, that are funded, and that are funneled to and disseminated through the masses. So yeah, sorry,
it's
what are
like
your thoughts?
well, it's like yeah. So Plato and Aristotle, they had some disagreements, but it's like Aristotle, aristocrat, like those words come from the same thing. It's like
Yeah,
Aristotle just had a updated version of Plato's philosopher king say. So I think that's part of it. And then you had that whole system spread out to Persia and even India, and then that that became sort of the de facto way of looking at government. And then this goes to what I was getting at. This goes to what I was getting at though with the whole Muslim connection with the Hashashin is if you look at early Islamic culture, they are more like the Greeks and the Romans than the medieval Christians and the British were. It's like the Europe definitely has Roman and Greek roots. Not I'm not saying that we don't, but I think those can be a little bit overplayed because it's more of like that mixed with this Germanic thing and the ideas of independence that we get liberalism from, that is absolutely more Germanic and Celtic than it is Greek or Roman. But people look at it when people think of Islam, especially in the West, a lot of time to think, oh, it's just like this repressive, masculine kind of thing where they're warlike and they're savages. It's like what happened with these Islamic countries is they actually through the early Middle Ages from between Muhammad's ascension and the Crusade era. So this changed around time. The Berbers went to North Africa and the Turks started coming in.
Mhm.
Islamic civilization was the most educated, most civilized, most liberal, most feminist, most capitalist place in the world. And it was much more like a continuity of the Greek Roman system than Europe was at the time. So on and another thing that's interesting is around the time Islam came to the scene and was this dominant cultural power, that was around the time the Frankish Empire collapsed. So there was Europe was at a pretty low point this time, and it's pretty funny because at when the Frankish Empire collapsed, you had straight up gangsters in Italy fill the power vacuum, and you got to the point where you had people issuing papal decrees, but the Pope was a dead mummy for a couple months. So they had a dead mummy on the papal throne. They end up having something called the trial of the cadavers, where they put a dead mummy on trial. It's like, wait, you heard about all these corrupt things, the papacy? Well, actually, it was this Pope. By the way, he's dead. We're gonna put him on trial and we're gonna blast him. All right. Well, we dealt with that. We dealt with that corruption by penalizing a mummy. So we're good to go now. You can trust us. Yeah, that's what was going on. That's what was going
I
on.
did not know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
No, but that's what was going on leading up to the Crusade era. So what I was getting at with Islam though is so Ger- these Germanic Northern European types, when they started getting into academics, a lot of times they'd actually take on Arab pen names because Arabs were seen as the high society. They were seen as intellectuals. So to be seen as intellectuals, like, oh yeah, well we're gonna take on Arab names. And at that point in the world, that's where I actually think the core of this more Gnostic, Mithraic secret society was. So I definitely think there were still elements of it in Rome, but the part of that part of specifically the Hashashin, that's what developed in this place. So on the other hand, in Europe, you still had precursors, Knights Templar. I definitely think Rome had there's a continuity going back from ancient Rome to the power structure. I definitely think you had elements of it in the Catholic Church at this time too.
Mm.
But the methodology I'm talking about, this mind control we're reading about, that was definitely more prominent in these Muslim countries. It's no coincidence that they were more wealthy and had the better military at this time. Also, when this is going on, so this is going back to Bill Cooper. This because remember I was talking about the Jesuits using schools, and I was kind of getting at that. That's a hint on them using that methodology of recruiting from schools shows that they have their roots in this much more ancient thing we're talking about. So this is documenting how they worked at the Muslim Golden Age. So from the beginning from the beginning of the split in the early days of Islam, the Shias relied for survival upon secrecy, and initiation. Although the minority party in Islam, they believe they could overcome the majority and eventually the whole world by superior organizational power. To this to this end, they started a number of societies which practiced secret rites in which the personality of Ali was worshipped and whose rank and file were trained to struggle above for the accomplishment of world dominion. So just a quick little side note on that. Sunni Muslims are known as the Orthodox Muslims. Sunni Muslims, they see Muhammad as the top authority they need to abide by, where the Shias or Shiites, they look at the fourth caliph, one of Muhammad's successors, Ali. They think, well, he's just as high up as Muhammad. It would be like, let's say someone like Barbarous had epistles written down who was associated with Paul. It would be like saying, wait, these are as important as Paul's epistles. Let's go with that instead. It's like Christianity doesn't have anything like that, but it would be kind of like, think about that for a comparison. So see if this ends up ringing a bell. So one of the most successful secret societies which the Shias founded was centered in the abode of learning in Cairo, which was the training ground for fanatics who were conditioned by the most cunning methods to believe in a divine mission. So they have a messiah complex.
Right.
In order to do this, the original democratic Islamic ideas had to be overcome by still skilled teachers acting under the orders of the Caliph of the Fatimids, who ruled Egypt at the time. So yeah, it's they think they're on this special mission, and notice how he says the original democratic ideas of Islam had to be overcome because our friend theology and geopolitics, I actually think he's right that these Taliban stuff that we see all over the internet, that's not what Islam always was. Like I used to be a little bit skeptical, but I started looking into it, and Muslims at this time, I would say overall, actually had better standards of living in a more liberal society in Northern Europe. I already said it, but it surprised me. But I'm not giving pro-Muslim apologetics. It's just the conclusion I came at from looking into this history.
You're saying at that
So,
time, though. Are you saying now or are you saying at that time?
well, what happened with Islam? What happened with Islam is that's how I was getting at with the Turkic incursions and the Berbers coming North Africa. So you know the new right we have now?
Yeah.
That's liberalism's the problem.
Right.
We need to return to tradition, but they're actually completely regressed. You had something like that take over these Islamic cultures. Imagine a reactionary new right contingent takes over. That's and completely stagnates a culture, stagnates innovation, and you just have this, you just kind of have this warrior culture, and there's not as many redeeming characteristics. That's what happened. It also happened around times of you have, so Turks were from the steppe, but you had other steppe incursions. So at the steppe, you have what I call an anti-culture because like they kind of just destroyed everything in their path and they were always nomadic. So part of it, what you had is you had the anti-culture come in and just destroy all these institutions and customs and civilized way of doing things, and they kind of never really recovered from it. But also, I think you did have some social engineering going on there. Also, I think that the inner levels, I think the inner levels, these Muslim power structures were on the same time, same side as Rome, same side Northern European Templars, and they used the Crusades to socially engineer them also. So I
And
can't prove that yet. That's the hypothesis stage, but it makes sense.
it does make sense. Interesting. And I mean, I was just thinking too, like when because you're asking about Plato and Greece, and he was very inspired by the ancient Egyptians, right? He keeps talking about the Egyptians, and I don't know how far back. I mean, but the Islamic culture.
Yeah, Egypt under the under the Muslims, Egypt became a major power center again. Now, it wouldn't be the same as like a military power, the same way the ancient empires worked, but there was definitely a lot of power broking and behind the scenes power going on, especially these universities, because like Cairo, that was like the new Alexandria.
Right.
There was quite a lot going on there, and by the way, so yeah,
That's what
The Benedict,
Memphis is, right, isn't that what Elon Musk was saying? He
yeah.
was saying Memphis, Tennessee, but he was like, "Well, that was the, head of, Egypt," and he was like, "Maybe that's where our new god will come from."
Well, Memphis, yeah, there's a reason why Memphis has a pyramid, and Memphis is
Yeah.
really big for logistics and transportation. It's like I definitely think at that pyramid you have in Memphis, you've got a trafficking cult going on, and you have a bunch of these charities. So one of the charities there, I don't want to get you in trouble by naming it, but you can actually you can look this up. Well, okay, you know what? This is actually documented. So St. Jude's.
Uh,
I've seen them busted for lying to their donors about donating to stem cells, and because you know, for those of you who don't know, stem cells, that industry is propped up by trafficking, and they get the supply for that from trafficking victims in a lot of cases.
yeah.
And yeah, that's all part of that whole Memphis complex, and they're the head of the American branch of the cult of Osiris at the very least. There's quite a lot of power going on there. I mean, once you it Prince Lorenzo Medici locked his Instagram account, but the Medici family from the medieval times, they're still one of the top families globally. Like when we talk about there being an aristocracy, the ruling aristocracy is largely based in Italy and Britain and Spain,
Mhm.
but they're quite active over here. Like this guy's all up in Arkansas where Iran Contras was carried out. He's all up there in his Instagram. He's also all up in Memphis. So just wanted to point that out. There's a reason why Elon's like, oh, we can expect the Antichrist. He has a call the Antichrist.
No, he said that's where our new god's gonna come from.
That's the Antichrist. Yeah, but but it's like he's saying that because there's a lot of behind the scenes power going on in Memphis, Tennessee. He
Yeah.
knows that. It's like a lot of people don't like they're like, well, maybe New York or some big city. Like, no, it's some of these like flyover places have some like Kansas City's another one. There's quite a lot of power
Oh,
over Kansas City
yeah.
too. You know,
Yeah.
just just stuff
Jacksonville
that.
and
Well, yeah, it's just things that a lot of people don't expect. But yeah,
well,
so
they can fly under the radar much more, and they have much more space. I mean, they're not gonna go to New York City where it's like, I mean, you're it's 12 miles long and 6 miles wide, like, and it's very crowded. You're not gonna have a whole lot of space for your operations, and if you do, you're gonna be likely more easily discovered. So, yeah.
well then so going back to the university recruiting though, so remember at this time, Muslims had the best scholars. So the Benedictine monks actually, when they got into Aristotle, and then later on this went to the Franciscans, Dominicans, like Thomas Aquinas, they they got a lot of that from the Muslims. And they actually had a lot of cultural exchange with them in Spain. The Benedictines had a large base in Spain and study with Muslims is a good bit. So the Muslims had the best scholarship and records at the time, and a lot of the kind of books they had have been burnt too. So there's a lot of insights it could have had that we have no way of knowing about right now. But so the university lavishly endowed and possessing the best manuscripts and scientific instruments available, received a grant of $250,000 of gold pieces from the Caliph. Remember, the Caliph is part of this secret society network. Its external form was similar to the pattern of the ancient Arab universities, not much different from Oxford. Yeah, because a lot of these Western institutions are actually based on the Muslim civilization. But its real purpose was the complete transformation of the mind of the student. Students had to pass through 9 degrees of initiation, the same number claimed by the York Rite of Freemasonry. In the first, the teachers threw their pupils into a state of doubt about all conventional ideas, religious and political. Hey, like, what does that sound like? Does it sound like Rene Descartes? Oh, you got to doubt everything, crawl into your Dutch oven. I think, therefore I am. There's your new foundation. Yeah, same exact methods. That this is why I was saying. This is why I was saying the if we
It's
want to go on to
Gnostic
the Enlightenment,
meditation.
huh?
It's essentially it lays the ground
Yes,
for Gnostic meditation. Yeah.
Yeah, and Rene, like, well, yeah, one of his, yeah, and notice, some of his, he has 7 main books, but a lot of them start with meditations.
Yep.
'Cause yeah, that's what he's doing. He's part of this esoteric cult. They used false analogy in every device of argument to make the aspirant believe that what he had been taught by his previous mentors was prejudice and capable of being challenged. So yeah, notice how one of Rene Descartes' arguments that you can't trust your senses, you gotta start with a certain foundation. I think, therefore I am. Well, hey, what if you're a brain in a vat and you have an evil demon god just giving you illusion? It's like that's the exact same kind of sophistry that they were using back then too.
Yep.
The effect the effect of this, according to the Arab historian Marquesery, was to cause him to lean upon the personality of the teachers as the only possible source of the proper interpretation of facts. At the time, the teachers hinted continually that formal knowledge was merely a cloak for hidden, inner, powerful truth, whose secret would be imparted when the youth was ready to receive it. This confusion technique was carried out until the student reached a stage where he was prepared to swear a vow of blind allegiance to his teachers. That's also what goes on once you become a fourth oath Jesuit. And by the way, this is why I think also the Jesuits made the fourth to 33rd degree in Scottish Rite is once you go through this first more exoteric, more open degrees where they have an explanation that the public can swallow, if people show that they can be molded and follow whatever order they're given, and they pass these ceremonies of initiation, then that's when they start becoming agents of a very evil death cult that can do completely unconscionable things. Because like normal people, if you do the kind of things that these secret societies do, a normal person with their conscience intact couldn't look at themselves in the mirror. This is why I keep bringing up they want to elicit cognitive dissonance in you, is because if you're impervious to cognitive dissonance and you can manage it with the kind of coping mechanisms the hierarchy gives, you can you can pretty much order a firing squad on a village that ends up killing a bunch of women and children and not even bat an eye. It's a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and of course, then these people end up infiltrating every single sector of society, and the longer it goes unchecked, the worse and worse it gets, and it ends up getting to the point where key positions and institutions can become so gate kept that once you get to a certain level of power, wealth, or prominence, you don't even have to have any evidence. You can just assume, okay, I don't know what group it is, but this guy's obviously part of something. Like if just because he became such and such position, that automatically means he's untrustworthy. I mean, I hate that it's at this point, but that's just and it makes sense how it got this level where it became so prominent. I mean, if it's something that has been going on for thousands of years and it's a methodology that's been practiced and they've mastered going under the radar, then it makes sense how we can have gotten to a state of affairs like this.
I think this is so important for people to understand because a lot of attention gets put on like who, what group, what organization, what person. That's where a lot of the focus is. People want. I keep saying like the only game people learned how to play growing up was pin the tail on the donkey, because that's really what people want. They want just like where they can point the finger, and that's the controlling entity for everything. But if you start looking at the tactics, I think that's way more important because then you can identify it. You can see these tactics and how they're deployed, and then you can start to identify the threat because that's actually way more important than the who. Because if you see those tactics, you know what's being done. You know where the threat is. And then you can start to engineer what the solution might be and how to counter it. Right? If you think about it as a warfare landscape, and a lot of this is, right? It's a psychological warfare, it's epistemological warfare, it's metaphysical warfare. And if you start to look at it that way, you have to be able to identify where is the threat, and then you can counter it. You don't look at the why or like, why did they deploy those tactics? who is the puppet master above them. That's not what you look at. It's a to make it really like concrete for people. If somebody's pointing a gun at you, you're not going to be like, oh, I wonder why they're doing that or who put them up to it. You're probably going to defend yourself, right? That's what your focus is. And I think that that's the same thing in any kind of warfare landscape. You need to be knowing how to respond. And when all the focus is on the who and speculating in that regard, I think that a lot of this gets lost, and the tactics are really what's important. But once you know the tactics, once you spot them, you can see them.
Okay, yeah. So since you were talking about let's pinpoint the methodology, if we can see the method going on, then you can start recognizing the pattern and start seeing
Yeah.
solutions. One of
Yes.
them, another aspect is of mind control is drugs. This goes back very far, but like I was saying earlier, it is really documented with the Hashashin or the assassin. So Hashashin, it comes from its founder Hassan. I can't
Mhm.
pronounce his later names. But
Yeah.
if you just look up Hashashin Hassan or Order of Assassins Hassan, you'll find this guy's full name. So Hassan, this is back to Cooper. Hassan began to attract
We
young
had
men.
I've had Leo Zagami on many times, and he talks about this too, and it's in his books as well. So,
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like this isn't just retard conspiracy stuff. There's a ton of documentation for it. Like way more people than just Bill Cooper talk about it.
oh,
But
sure.
it's like I like to use him because he's actually reading from quotes and actually cites his sources too. So it's like if he when he's wrong, you can at least know why he's wrong.
Mhm.
So Hassan began to attract young men from the surrounding countryside between the ages of 12 and 20. That's the same age group Opus Dei goes for, by the way. Particularly those whom he marked out as possible material for the production of killers. Every day he held court, a reception at which he spoke about the delights of paradise, and at certain times he caused droughts of soporific nature to be administered to 10 or a dozen youth, and that means he's drugging them. And when half dead with sleep, he had them conveyed to the several palaces and apartments of the garden. Upon awakening from this state of lethargy, their senses were struck by all delightful objects, and each perceiving himself surrounded by lovely damsels, singing, playing, and attracting his regards by the most fascinating caresses, serving him also delicious viands and exquisite wines, until intoxicated with excess and enjoyment amidst actual rivers of milk and wine, he believed himself assuredly in paradise and felt an unwillingness to relinquish his delights. When 4 or 5 days had thus been passed, they were thrown once more into a state of solemnity, drugged, and carried out of the garden. Upon being carried to his presence and questioned by him as to where they had been, their answer was in paradise through the favor of your highness. And then, before the whole court listened to them with eager astonishment and curiosity, they gave a circumstantial account of the scenes to which they had been witness. The chief thereupon addressing them said, "We have the assurance of our prophet that he who defends his Lord shall inherit paradise. And if you show yourself to be devoted to the obedience of my orders, that paradise awaits you." So they set it up in a way to where once the more initiated you are, you literally look at your superior as the voice of God. You literally see them as a divine figure that you have to answer. And if you look at the Jesuit oaths, also the Jesuit oaths, they literally say, look at the Black Pope and even people under him, like maybe your provincial, your superior. You need to look at them as God, even if they say rip a baby out of a woman's fetus and dash the baby's head on rocks. Dude, like oh, it gets that dark. Wait, that might have been Knights of Columbus, but there's nasty stuff in both of them. Yeah, like the Knights of Columbus one was actually admitted to Congress, so it's like this stuff's on official record. Yeah, and then I'm sure they're just all benevolent people. Yeah, that's totally not how it works. No, but so I actually found there's more going on than just this quote, but it's like I don't want to just keep reading ones. This isn't from Bill Cooper. This is from Edmund Paris. This is just to show continuity between this method and the Jesuit order. So just look into more of Ignatius Loyola's visions. He
Oh, yeah.
goes off on this guy had a messiah complex. He's just like the people in these societies. Because remember, these grand masters, they claim to be the representatives of God. Like Ola had a horrible messiah complex, and he once you look at his account of the visions he had, it sounds like someone who was high and hallucinating. And if you look into things like ego death, for those of you who are in the psychedelic scene or those of you who read so-called trip reports,
Um,
what he describes with his meditations is just like the so-called ego death, but there's a paradox where there's actually an ego alignment. So on one hand, you feel like your sense of self is being obliterated, but then once your sense of self is obliterated, your actual ego, it starts absorbing other things because you're like, wait, my ego is a part of the universe, and therefore I'm God knowing Himself. Before I even did any of this research, I had thoughts like that when I was taking mushrooms, and I thought it was the most profound thing ever. But once I learned more, I'm like, wait, I never want to do that again. So this is Edmund Paris. Mr. Boehmer adds that the deep meaning of the dogmas was revealed to him, that's Ignatius Loyola, as a special favor from on high through transcendental intuitions. Many mysteries of faith and science became suddenly clear to him, and later he pretended to have learned more in those short moments than during the whole of his study. That sounds like a trip. That sounds like something if who took mushrooms and feels like they know all the secrets. Well, I don't think he was on mush. Like what I think Loyola was doing, and I think he was doing a bundle of opium hash and actually datura. There's datura seeds, and don't do that. That's such a yeah, I've never.
I
That's
don't even
one of
know
the
what
only
that is. I am not even familiar.
Datura, yeah. So Datura, it's one of those things that can give you lifelike hallucinations where you can actually see people, not distinguish them from reality. But like if you're high on Datura, it's not a pleasant kind of high because your body can't retain fluid, so you're always peeing, and no matter how much water you drink, you feel dehydrated. It's a real. I've never had it. I've read about people who took it. It's a really unpleasant experience, but opium and marijuana can probably counteract some of those negative side effects, but it still isn't really my idea of a fun time. That's for sure. So, however, he was never able to explain what these mysteries were, which suddenly became clear to him. Yeah, you just have to experience it. Yeah. There was only a hazy recollection left, a feeling of something miraculous, as if at that moment he had become another man of another intelligence. All this may be the result of a nervous disorder and can be identified with what happens to smokers of opium and eaters of hashish. That enlargement or extension of the ego, that illusion of soaring up beyond what is real, a flashing sensation, leaving only a day's recollection. Blissful visions and illuminations were constantly companions of this mystic throughout his life. Yeah, look. I've read plenty of trip reports, and it definitely sounds like what Loyola's going through. He's that I definitely think he's on hallucinogens when he has these visions of saints and Mary or whatever. It's
Um,
drugs. He never doubted the reality of these revelations. He chased Satan with a stick. That sounds like something you'd see on Datura. Like, he would he would have done a mad dog. He talked to the Holy Spirit as one does to another person, actually. He asked for the approval of God, the Trinity, and the Madonna on all of his projects and would burst into tears of joy when they appeared to him. On these occasions, he had a foretaste of celestial bliss. The heavens were open to him, and the Godhead was visible and perceptible to him. Like, yeah,
well,
I I I don't believe that he actually had legitimate revelations like that.
right.
And I mean, a lot of conservative Catholics more not orthodox in like the Eastern Orthodox sense of the word, but whenever they hear about people claiming all these visions and claiming to talk to the Holy Spirit, they'd be a little skeptical. So if you're listening to that and you're like, wait, Ignatius Loyola, he was a trad. He likes Thomas Aquinas. What? Okay, what a hardcore conservative Thomist make claims like that. I mean, a lot of the conservative Catholics who think the Jesuits are on their side, or these conservatives, they just don't know a lot of this stuff. But just ask yourself, does claiming
Most traditional Catholics I know don't align with Jesuits. Like they're taught that Jesuits are not real Catholics. That's what I've heard. So
that's common? I've seen that, but there
they are also very anti-Masonic. That's those two are like big things that they're taught. I don't
it
know.
might just be some of these Gen Z guys, because I had some Gen
Okay,
Z guys like try and oh, they'll say maybe after the 60s, well, the Jesuits pushed some stuff in Vatican II that I don't like, but they've always been Thomistic, and that's kind of what I've been heard. But that also might be more of like the kind of Gen Z narratives, where because
maybe.
the more you read in their history, the more indefensible it becomes. It's like, oh yeah, and by the way, one thing that I can understand someone being a Catholic and saying, well, okay, Vatican II went a little bit too far, and okay, I can't defend Pope Francis, but I've actually met traditional conservative Catholics. They defend all of that, and yeah, that's
Wow.
that's a that's a level of cognitive dissonance that I can't quite comprehend. And they they
Yeah.
do they do such mental gymnastics to try and make everything square away. But yeah.
Wow.
Oh,
I
Michael
haven't heard
Lofton.
that from. Mhm.
Mike, okay, look up Michael Lofton. Jay Dyer. Jay Dyer's had some rather funny encounters with him, but he's
Uh,
one of them. Jay Dyer will end up just completely roasting and blasting his people.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Well, okay, yeah. So with that kind of experience I just read with like them doing drugs, sensory overload, this is from James Billington's Fire in the Mind of Men, because this whole method carried over into the French Revolution. By the way, that was Illuminati. Even James Billington, he doesn't really say the Jesuits are behind this, and he kind of frames like the Illuminati. Well, they were just kind of these occultists who were intellectuals. They weren't really powerful, but their ideas passed down and being influential. But they weren't really in any big conspiracy. Like I think he doesn't come out and say it, but the people who I hear read him and analyze the stuff. A lot of them repeat that, like a lot of the academics. But
Mhm.
James H. Billington writes about how all a bunch of these people writing newspapers are Nicholas Bonneville. A lot of these people in the Nine Sisters Masonic Lodge, including Voltaire, they were all Jesuit trained. And what's funny is a lot of these anti-clericalists, they were taught and trained by Jesuits. And Voltaire even had liaisons. Shoot, I have this on my Twitter, but him and another Freemason anti-clericalist, they had liaisons with their Jesuit professor from the Claremont, from no, yeah, from the same college where the Scottish Rite degrees were actually hammered out.
Oh.
It's like that shows you that they had their hands in that too. But yeah, so this was around the time where the Jesuits started getting expelled from France, started getting expelled from all those other countries. So people will say, wait, aren't Jesuits on the side of Catholics? Why would they be siding with atheists? Why would they be behind the French Revolution? Well, because the Franciscans and Dominicans were the ones kicking the Jesuits out of institutions, and they were the ones pressuring the governments to expel the Jesuits. So, of course, if they want to hold on to their power and throw chaos, they're going to inject nihilism and anti-clericalism into that situation. It's a military calculation. It's like if you think of it, oh well, they have this set of goals where what you see is what you get. It's like, okay, then the kind of framing advice I'm giving, it won't make sense. But I'd say the contrary, where oh, just what you see is what I'd say with all the evidence that I've seen, that's actually the less rational explanation for all this. So yeah, this is Fire in the Minds of Men. So remember, Palais Royale, for those of you in the audience who don't know, Palais Royale is the Duke of Orleans is actually. So remember, I was talking about how the Habsburg was involved with the founding of the Illuminati. Lorraine, a bunch of these nobles and royals were actually the ones behind the scenes orchestrating supposedly anti-royalist movements. Because what was going on is they knew that there was more liberal sentiments, and they knew there was a growing middle class. So they knew anti-monarchy and decentralization was coming either way. So what was going on with these orchestrated revolutions is these very people were creating backdoor channels for their power while getting the aristocrats who wanted to try and maintain things the old way out of their way. And the Duke of Orleans was one. And the Duke of Orleans, that's something that's easier to confirm with mainstream history. He was responsible for the death of his cousin Louis Bourbon, King Louis, and Antoinette the Habsburg, who was Maximilian. Maximilian, the Grand Master of the Teutonic Knights, that was the ringleader of the Illuminati, one of the ringleaders of the French Revolution. He tried warning his sister, like, "Hey, you better get out of here because I know it's coming, and you don't want to be here." And she didn't listen. She ended up getting, well, we know what happened to Marie Antoinette. So oh yeah, and she also gave concessions to the American liberals, and I don't think the inner hierarchy got everything they wanted out of the American Revolution. So I think the Jesuits were also pissed off at her for that too. So, but why was the Palais Royal able to mobilize mass emotion so successfully during the early years before full state power and military emergency could be invoked against it? The truth seems to be that the cafes provided not just a protected place for political meetings, but also intoxicating ambience of earthly utopia. Distinctions in rank were obliterated, and men were free to exercise sexual as well as political freedom. In the course of a single visit, one might sip such libations of liberation as a new tricolored liquid, savor foreign foods, and perfume boetes. I can't pronounce that word, but remember the perfume was in the initiation, going back to Egyptian times too. But this is like, oh, let's go to the hangout, and you're gonna see all these new ideas, then overwhelm their senses. So while they're being indoctrinated, and looking at these new ideas, they feel like they're on the verge of some new otherworldly reality also because they're having their senses messed with. See the La Terma Magica trace of the history of the world in the apartment of Felipe Agata. Visit the quasi pornographic wax museum in the arcades. Attend a melodrama which included music and acrobats in the cirque. Then go underground for entertainment that ranged from ventriloquism by a dwarf to sex with a 7 foot 2 inch Prussian prostitute. Yeah. So
No.
yeah, that it's like it just sounds like the same exact kind of method that the Passchine order assassins use, just sort of cut in a different context. But now they're doing it more sneakily. Now this is taking place in more social gatherings. I mean, have you seen the videos I posted on Twitter where people are going to these concerts and they see these things in the street and people in the audience are just losing their minds? Have you seen some of those posts?
I don't think I
Like
have.
these. Okay,
Maybe.
I can send them. I can send them to you. But like,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, it's they. Oh, tons of one of them. They have this oea, like there's just like these vowels being constantly repeated with really hypnotic and entrancing music with a really catchy beat while there's just lights flashing. Then you'll see some CGI. You'll see some CGI Earth goddess come out and blow smoke at you. Then you'll see galaxies form out of the smoke on this really big dome screen, and it's
Oh
just
boy.
it's just complete sensory overload. And the people who are in the filming these events, they sometimes turn the camera on themselves and they're like they're losing their minds and they're really
Uh,
excited and ecstatic. It's like go through these initiations where they are brought into a state of ecstasy and bliss. It's it's just decentralized initiations, and it's not the same as they have someone guiding them through it where, oh, well, you need to pass this brainwashing. Well, guess what? They have the schools doing that for them. So then they go to these events and they have certain cognitive barriers broken down because frequency. Oh, I used to brush this off, but frequencies like that, visuals like that, they can take away inhibitions and
oh,
filters and really mess people up.
for
It,
sure.
it yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
that's proven. That's scientifically proven. I don't know who's, questioning that. Yeah.
oh, the people who question that, the people who question that, the people who like going to those events. That's who questions it.
Who what? Oh, who go to
The
these events. Yeah, yeah,
people
fair
who go to
enough.
these events, they're the ones who say, "Oh, that's bullsh that's BS science." Well, it
Right.
it's the same as, "Wait, I like fornicating all the time." Well, why w the Bible says that's wrong. "Oh, of course, we know the Bible is a fairy tale." It's the same kinda logic as that, yeah.
Right, right.
Well
Oh.
well, yeah, but
Yeah.
there's so many connections from the old Muslim world to where these Gnostic, Hermetic, secret societies came up into Europe. This actually gets into the whole Spanish connection that
Okay,
I've
yeah.
been telling you about. So, obviously the Jesuit order, it came from a bunch of Spaniards, so it officially came from France, that because,
Right.
that's where they were organized, but part of the reason why is Ignatius Loyola went to the French university because he was being pursued by the Inquisition, and so were other founding Jesuits being pursued by the Inquisition, and the one who bailed them out was Francis Borgia of House Borgia. So Borgia, I think Borgia is one of the top families today. I mean, George H.W. Bush would go to Ecuador and play tennis with the Borgia from the Borgia family. They're still at the top, and they're based in Valencia, Spain. Valencia, Spain. They were like the go-betweens for human trafficking. So back when Genoa and Venice had a civil war, they were updating the trafficking routes through Valencia, and Valencia was the one coming up with the maritime law at the Silk Exchange. And the Silk Exchange, since you had a bunch of these merchants meeting up and signing contracts with each other, Valencia and the Silk Exchange also experimented with the first international municipal banks. So obviously, the Knights Templar had those institutions, but Valencia is where a lot of those Templars went. Hardly anything to talk about. So Borgia is based in Valencia, and you also had the Order Matessa go there. So Borgia, who was he had relatives in Habsburg and these other royal families in Spain. So he had a lot of institutional connections. So he was able to shelter the Jesuits from the Inquisition because they knew Loyola was Gnostic. They knew he was a heretic, and Loyola actually had to tone down some of his Gnostic stuff when he published his exercises. Like there's some things that are actually unpublished by him, but we still have records of that are even more damning. And the sect they were part of is called the Almombrados. It's If you look up Spanish Illuminati, you'll be able to find it, but it's illuminated ones. They had a branch like this in Afghanistan called the Roshain. That's something we can get more into in another one because there's so many details I'm skipping over,
Sure.
but I'd argue they're all the same thing. So Roshain, Almombrados. So the Order of Assassins is a formal
I
organization. They got
looked
they
up
got
on Bradas when you were telling me about it, and it's very interesting because it does sound like it's the same exact tactics.
Well, go scroll down on the Alan Brada's page because you'll see how founding Jesuits were accused of being them and how they end up defending other Almombrados members. So what happened is the Almombrados, they ended up getting suppressed by the Inquisition. But what happened? You had so Borgia, they were one of the royal families protecting, but also a lot of these Almombrados, like since these institutions, these secret societies are highly connected to education, a lot of them were multilingual. So the ones that didn't become Jesuits actually joined the German Teutonic Knights under Habsburg, and the German Teutonic Knights also helped create the Illuminati. So see how it all, yeah, yeah, like I'd
Yeah.
so
How
Roshain, Illuminati, Almombrados, they were all Gnostic. They all like the Almombrados, even this Wikipedia talks about how there's Ignatius Loyola on the screen.
uh-huh.
They have this idea that because we're Gnostic and because the body is fake, sexual immorality is okay. It's okay for us to fornicate, and we can actually get spiritual enlightenment from fornicating. And they were anti-private property. They wanted to abolish division between nations and institute a communistic world government. That was from the sect in Afghanistan that opposed the Moguls, and that was from the sect in Spain. But what I was getting at with the Hashashin link is these things popped up after the Mongols and Tatars. So you had Mongols, Tatars, Turkic groups
Right.
pretty much crushed the Assassins as a formal organization. Now, some people say that oh, the Order of Assassins ended. No, they just changed their name, similar to how Bavarian Illuminati. Nope, we're the Carbonari now. Nope, we're the Young Europe now. Oh, we're the League of the Just. We're the League of the Outlaws. We're the Communist International now. And then oh no, we're the Sicilian Mafia. We're the Calabrian Mafia because the Mafia came from the Illuminati too. Like they're all the same thing. Oh, another Spanish connection. There's so many things. There's so many things to cover, but not enough time. It's just like, I could go on for 6 hours with all this.
We'll
In
do a
the
follow-up.
in the mafia's initiation though, so this is for Camorra, the Naples mafia, Nadrigetta, the Calabrian one, and La Cosa Nostra. I forget the Spanish brother's name, but they claim that their organizations actually go back to three Spanish knights who were brothers when Bourbon had Bourbon wouldn't have been around back then. So Bourbon came later, but Spain, the Spanish crown had those regions of southern Italy. So they claim, yeah, the mafia claim they actually have their origins from Spanish knights back in the 1500s when Spain held those territories too. And
Hmm.
yeah, they would have probably been Almenbrados. Now there's not as much historical records. This is more what the mafia claims. So some people take it at face value, but I think they're probably correct. There's just no really there's just really not a way to confirm that.
Right.
But yeah, so you had you had that sect come from the Hashashin. So obviously the Knights Templar were also part of the Jesuit order. It's like the Jesuit order even claims origins with the Knights Templar. They claim to in some ways be the progenies, and not all of them will claim that, but if you look into kind of niche writings, you can find that. But what the Almenbrados was pretty much both Templar splinters and Hashashin splinters that merged, and they would have merged. One of the main places would be Valencia. Another one would actually be Leon. That would be like northwest Spain, where Valencia that would be southeast, like towards like facing towards Genoa.
Right.
That's a lot of people know. But if you look up Spain on the map, you'll be able to see where I'm talking about. And also, if you see where Valencia's position on the map, like how it's facing North Africa and Italy, and how it doesn't take long to get to the Atlantic Ocean. It can actually be pretty clear how Valencia becomes this big strategic city, but hardly anyone talks about it. And
Mm.
back to Borgia though, the House of Borgia. So Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia. He's probably one. I'd say he's probably the most openly powerful pope we've had. Oh, and maybe Pope Francis actually. Pope Francis was huge. A lot of people, I don't think a lot of people realize how powerful Pope Francis actually was. He was going around bossing the Knights of Malta. He he actually pressured the last Spanish Jesuit Pope, Black Pope, to step down. And he put what Venezuelan guy who he was buddies with in charge of the Jesuit order. So it actually looks like Pope Francis was actually the real de facto head of the Jesuit order. And no one that's just a small time guy can go around and boss around the Grand Master for the Knights of Malta, make them accept the new code. So Francis was really high up there. He also helped create the cartels. He was overseeing Operation Condor. There was two smaller, lower ranked Jesuits who were opposing Condor and were like, "Hey, what are you doing, colluding with these Nazis going to Argentina?" Well, they got carried away and taken to a torture facility where they had like electric wires put over their private parts, and yeah, like he's seen as this nice old guy pope. Oh, maybe he's a bleeding heart liberal. Yeah, that's why he wants all religions coming together. He's just a nice, sentimental old man. It's like, no, this guy was a bloodthirsty monster who could play the part. But yeah, so the Borgia Pope, who I'd say was the most powerful one before him, he made all these reforms in the Catholic Church where they could more openly practice simony. And one of the reasons why the Reformation happened is because the Borgia Pope increased the sale of indulgence to fund his wasteful projects and his extortive projects to, to where like they under Borgia they had this idea where okay, the sin of murder, you can have your sins forgive for that if you pay us a certain amount. Like that's how gangster like and exhorted the practices became, and that's one of the reasons why the Reformation ended up happening, because he was just that corrupt.
Right.
But yeah, Borgia would be the ones overseeing that. So Borgia, I don't think that. So Bill Cooper claims that Ignatius Loyola was the head of the Almenbrados who created the Jesuit order. It's like I can see why he's saying that, but if you actually look, it looks like Francis Borgia, who would have been the grandson of Alexander III, it looks like he was actually Ignatius Loyola's boss. So, and he was also the third. He was also the third Jesuit general. So
Huh.
yeah, yeah. So he would have also been overseeing the Templar splinter. So Valencia has a big Templar splinter. I talked about how it was called the Order of Montesa. So the Order of Montesa, they're openly called warrior monks, and they were chartered in 1317, just 3 years after the Knights Templar were permanently suppressed. So a lot of them they joined the Knights Hospital, are now the Knights of Malta.
Mhm.
Others went up to Scotland. That's where I think speculative masonry came from. So I don't even think all those Templars that escaped and went to Scotland were even bad guys. So like a lot of people say, oh look, you have the Order of Rosecroix up in Scotland. You have it's like I'm not convinced all those guys are bad guys. Like, yeah, you have an organization sworn to secrecy, so you can have some shady stuff there, but people just assume like, oh, there's these symbol there, therefore every single person in the symbol, every single person involved with this, they're all conspirators on the same thing. It's just I'd yeah, I'd say it's not that compartmentalized. We're not at that 15-minute city type
Right.
ballpark yet in terms of how much control this hierarchy has. But one thing
Well, it's
about
also
Knights Templar,
just not everybody who's gonna be in a group is gonna be like an operator. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. I think the best analogy is like if you think about a fraternity or like a sorority, right? You get hazed. You don't know what happens you don't know what the seniors are doing, right? The freshmen have no clue. They have no clue what the next initiation process is. I think it's the same thing. Yeah.
well, and it's like in a case where there's Knights Templar being suppressed, they're wanted by the Inquisition, and they're considered fugitives. If if we assume that not all of them are criminals, not all of them are in a conspiracy, it also makes sense that they'd go to some stonemasons guild and have layers of secrecy for self-defense. Now later on, that's totally with layers of secrecy like that, that's a pre-existing hierarchy that criminals can easily use, infiltrate, and exploit. But it's like the kind of argumentation I see that I have issue with is in 1600s, let's say the stonemasonry guilds evolved into the today's Rosicrucian order. Now there's been other Rosicrucian orders, other Rosicrucians. Some people argue they've all been the same ones. I'm not convinced of that. I'm actually about to get to a quote that shows that, but they'll be like, well, look, they're doing this conspiratorial, shady stuff in the 1600s. Therefore, this degree that had the same imagery and iconography, the 1300s, they're up to the same thing. It's like, hey, maybe like, hey, that could be a hint to look into something, but that doesn't automatically prove that either.
Sure.
That's something. Yeah, that's an issue I have with the overall methodology for a lot of the people sort of researching the same things that
Sure.
I do. But yeah, when it comes to Knights Templar, they're credited as being the first municipal bankers. They there was banking before them, but they really got the method down to where you could have a check to deposit it in one place, then pull out money all the way across the Mediterranean. The people who really improved on that would have actually been Rothschild, because Medici didn't have banks all over Europe. And most places you could only deposit checks between certain diets. It wasn't international like Rothschild made it, because they had banks in every single country. So the Knights Templar banking innovations can't really be understated, but
Mhm.
they also have connections to that Muslim world with origins from Spain. So, like, it's similar to the Jesuit order. The Jesuit order was chartered and organized out of France and Italy, similar to how the Knights Templar were organized and created in southern France. But their founders were initiated into secret societies actually by Sufi Muslims and Moors who were in Spain. So this behind the scenes Spanish masonry is something that's really overlooked more, and people will end up looking just at the Vatican, London, maybe go over to Venice and places like that. So Italy and England usually get all the focus, but these Spanish channels tend to get left out of the equation. But this is from a Templar Grand Master, actually. So from a Templar Grand Master, Hugh de Payens, the first Grand Master of the Templar Order, had originally been initiated into the Gnostic tradition from his grandfather, Tybalt de Payens Le Mor de Gladio, who was a Moorish Sufi. Tybalt, and that wouldn't be the Sunnis. That wouldn't be the Sunnis. That would be the Shia. That would be the same kind of group that Bill Cooper was talking about. Tybalt had already been in Tybalt had already been initiated into the Gnostic tradition, and his involvement paved the way of Pagan's initiation into the Order of Rose Cross created by Amos. So Amos, that would have actually been Alucin, the Bishop of Canterbury, who was Charlemagne's advisor, who was credited with the Carolingian Renaissance. So, according to this Templar, he was initiated in Egypt also, and was like a really high up Gnostic Mason, which I haven't seen any other source confirm it, but it seems really believable with just like the kind of books he had access to, like how he had access to all this material that was more unknown to Europe at that time, and didn't really come back until you had more Arab ideological exchanges. Yeah, there's something going on there. The Moorish Sufi tradition of Hugh de Payens' family is the reason why the original blazon was composed of three Moor's heads, which represent the family line. Payens the same as Pagani in early Italian. So yeah, you can find the Pagani coat of arms where it shows the Moor's heads on the sigil, which is exactly what the Grand Master Knights Templar Hogan here is describing. In 1096, Hugh de Payens and Godfrey de Saint Odmar had already achieved important levels within the order established by Amos, and this is why they were sent to Constantinople, and from there, ultimately from Jerusalem. So the entire time, the entire time the Crusades were going on, it's like, yeah, you had Christians and Muslims fighting each other, but the high-end Crusader guys, especially the German Teutonic Knights, who were these European nobles going through Levant, they were they had this gentleman's code between the Jews and Muslims there, where they all pretty much tolerate each other and would exchange ideas and goods with each other. And people have this idea where, oh, the Crusading Templars, they're these people with this strong in-group preference. It's like maybe you had some degree of that, especially during battles, but overall, it was much more syncretistic on every single side, both from the Muslim side and the Christian side, than people give credit for. And there was a lot of Gnosticism going on too. So it's like what's interesting is the Albigenses and Waldenses were being persecuted by the Inquisition at the time of Saint Bernard Clairvaux, who was another one of the Knights Templars founders. But Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, he actually tried intervening to protect those guys, and I think that's because he was, at the very least, sympathetic to the Gnostics in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing goes with other Templars. So it's like, but they I think another part of it is the inner levels of those other monastic orders who are carrying out the Inquisition. I also think they have those same mind control methods and would use Gnostic and Hermetic methods. So they kind of were seeing it as, wait, us as a centralized power, we're the ones with the ring of power. We're not going to just share the ring of power with anyone else. So I also think that's another part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is back to Templar Grand Master Hogan. Templar tradition has suggested that the Templar Order accomplish its mission of rescuing certain artifacts and documents from the Holy Land. In fact, traditional Kabbalistic teaching has maintained that the Templar Order managed to revive the original Zohar in Separ HaBari by air. That's like the Zoroastrian text with that has some
Mm-hmm.
the, from Jerusalem, and that these were given to Jewish communities in Spain. So yeah, the this is where Kabbalah was synthesized. So Kabbalah is a later retcon with other imagery of both the Egyptian tree of life, but also Zoroastrianism. So it's like a synthesis of this whole Canaanite Egyptian worship system, but then added with Persian Zoroastrianism that the Order of Assassins would also practice. And Zohar is like another Jewish spin on that.
Hmm.
And that's why I sometimes will talk about Sephardic Jews in Spain, because they were critical in developing this, and this is also why if you see someone that's a Kabbalist, people automatically say, "Oh, Kabbalah, that means they're a crypto Jew," because there were a lot of Sephardic Jews involved with that, but they're doing a part the whole fallacy, because there were also Sufi Muslims, there were also Moors, there were also Berbers, there were also Europeans and Christians involved with that. It's like the ultimate syncretism. What Kabbalah and Spanish Masonry is like the ultimate syncretism of all three Abrahamic traditions. You got some African voodoo in there, and also old world paganism. It's like it's a giant mess. It's a giant mess, and you can see how ultimate mind control methods could come from something like that, and it makes sense. It makes sense why a place like Spain would be that, because it's at the end of the Silk Road, but it's not too far from Africa also, so it's like that's gonna end up being the destination for a lot of these things, more so than some place like the Balkans or Germany ever would be.
Just
So
you're
mhm.
saying just the location alone
Well,
would basically
the
dominate?
loca not it's partly that, but then it's also the fact that it was held by Muslims, and before Muslims, it was held by Jews too, so it's like you have all those different components, and every single one of those traditions will have, like, Masonic secret societies too, so,
Mm,
of course, they're going to mix and match, but then not all, so that you have those pre-existing societies there, but then also the Silk Road terminates, so all those things together is what I'm getting at.
gotcha.
So then
Did you
this is go mhm.
Oh, sorry, go on, yeah.
So the Zohar was then published by the same printers who published Parziva by Wolfram von Eschenbach for the first time. Haim Azalal in 1755 records the following. Based on ancient Jewish record, the Zohar was found in the land of Israel by Muslim workers who were serving Christian Templar masters. A Muslim worker unearthed some clay jar inside of which were some ancient scrolls. The worker then took the scrolls to his Christian master, who could not decipher them. The Christian master then went to a local trusted rabbi who was indeed able to recognize and decipher the scrolls, and thus the Zohar was discovered. The scrolls were then smuggled out of the Holy Land in the Jewish hands who traveled on a Templar ship. They made their way to Spain in the hands of Rabbi Moshe de Leon. It is allegedly he who transcribed the scrolls and published the Zohar. I actually believe this. So, Rabbi Moshe de Leon, that means he's from Leon, Spain. Leon, it's for the people who know to look in Spain and know a little bit about the Kabbalah tradition, they know it came out of Spain. It came from Spain.
You're saying Kabbalah came out of Spain? Is that what
Yes.
you're okay, interesting.
No, because the Khazarian mafia people will say it was the Khazarians who came. Oh, that's a bunch of
There's
hogwash. There's
no
no evidence.
evidence for Khazarian mafia. Like,
Yeah.
I they can't historians can't even agree on, like, when the king converted. They're, like, a century apart. I mean, like, mainline top historians, can't agree on this. There's just no evidence for the Khazarian Mafia. I actually think part of the reason they've chosen Khazaria for this whole mythic, story is because it is actually a place where you had Jews, Christians, Muslims, pagans, atheists living together in harmony and prosperity. We can't have that story propagating. So, yeah.
Well, also it's the same kind of synthesis they had going on in Spain, but it wasn't really the same. It wasn't really the same thing. I'd say there was much more power over in Spain, but it does look to me like there were some power players that came from that region and had late, but it's like they take things out of context and then add unproven context to it to spin this narrative. That's why it's like if someone points to me like, hey, there were some power moves here, it's like, hey, I can accept that, but they take it way further than that. It's like, wait, one instance of a power move in that area, therefore they start posting these memes about the Khazarian mafia as if that proves all of it too. And oh, I've even seen people posting pictures of a bunch of these conspirators in the Bolshevik Revolution, and they're like, you can see the look on all their Khazarian face. They're making a claim that they all have the same phenotype. It's like once you look at it, it's like, wait, some of these people look Slavic, some of these people do look Ashkenazi, but some of them actually look Asiatic. It's like there I see four different phenotypes here. What are you talking about by Khazarian faces? It
Right,
just
right.
it's such a BS narrative. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, so the temple the Muslim and Christian secret societies, I'd say, actually goes back to the Reconquista, and that so the whole the whole Crusader spirit actually originated in Spain, and I think part of it was the El Cid myths, but it actually goes back before El Cid. So once the Muslims went up to Spain and started conquering them, they drove the Christian to these mountain communities where they were in hiding up in Spain. You had Benedictine monks, and you had other orders come in there, and also the Order of Santiago, which came up as a contemporary of the Knights Templar, came out of this whole thing also. But what what you had there is it was these compartmentalized communities that didn't have as much in common other than they were previously Visigoth territories. But then you had these manufactured myths and saintly figures based on local folklore come out, and from there you you slowly had this shared cultural kind of pantheon come out of there. And I see it's like some of that might happen organically, but I actually see a good bit of I see a good bit of social engineering coming out of that. So then they're always at war, and they start trying to take back territories from the north. So you have this on one hand, you have this militaristic culture, but on the other hand, there's an external threat. So you gotta submit to authorities and follow orders too.
Right.
But then what gets left out a lot is up until around the complete unification of Spain, when the Spanish power structure already had a bunch of territory, quite a lot of the time they assimilated the Muslims they conquered. Kind of like how how they took out a lot of natives in Mexico and Peru and those places, but the ones who weren't taken out by disease or invasion, they integrated, and they even keep their like whole Spanish not Spanish, their whole Native American folk idols and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, well, this is just we're just gonna call us a Catholic saint now." Like, they had that same kind of syncretism. It's like this very kind of masculine with some Muslim characteristic type very peculiar Catholicism came out of Spain because of this. But while all this was going on, you also had exchange of ideas, literacy, some studies on Aristotle and the classics between the Arabs and the uh, Benedictine monks come from here. I've already brought that up earlier, but the
Mm,
one of the reasons why the European university system was set up the way it was is because the Spanish orders, well, it wouldn't always be Spanish orders, but orders that might have had bases maybe in Italy and some or in some other places, but also had bases in Spain. They'd get ideas from Muslims, then later down the line, those methods and ideas would transfer to Northern Europe, and the entire university system was based on the Arab civilization. Actually, like that's something that Bill Cooper went over, but it's and of course, there's going to be behind the scenes power moves between these groups also. So later on, once we get to El Cid, so El Cid is like the progenitor for Templar culture. His name was Rodrigo. I can't remember his last name, but he he served in the court of, I think it was Alfonso the Sixth.
mhm.
But he also served in the court of Muslims. So once you look into El Cid, there's a lot of stories that seem fantastical. So it's hard for me to know how much is real about him, how much is just fabricated propaganda BS. But
Mhm.
it's pretty obvious he was working with both the Muslim powers and the Christian powers. So one of the reasons why Valencia became so powerful is because once he took it over, he actually let the Muslims. It was similar to Alexander the Great taking over Persia. It was it's like, yeah, the guard changed a little bit, but all the people running it, like all the Muslims, were still there. And this, since Valencia is a port, and you had all this Muslim Christian syncretism, that's how Valencia became this giant center for trade. Would even coordinate between the triple agents working between the Genoan and Venetian power factions. Because a lot of people who study this conspiracy stuff, they point to Genoa and Venice a lot, but they hardly ever get to Valencia. And I
Right.
actually think Valencia is a bigger deal than both of them. So there's tons of hints that through the entire Reconquista there was synthesis between these things, but what often gets left out is that, so when I was talking about how the Muslim cultures kind of went in this regressive reactionary direction where their standards of living went down, their innovation stagnated, they didn't really have as much of a robust university structure in a lot of those old places.
Right.
Spain Spain is actually one of the last places where they did pretty well, but when when the reconquistadors came and took over parts of Spain, actually, especially towards the high medieval period after the Crusades, the standards of living in those Spanish areas actually became worse off because the Spanish system, when you hear the new right talk about distributism, that actually came from the Spanish system.
Right.
So
The
you would
Spanish
actually
system
have,
when?
huh?
The Spanish system when? Like, at what time? Yeah.
High medieval period, around the time they started unifying. Well, even so, there was more flexibility and freedom. They had more multiculturalism where they could have practicing Jews and Muslims get along with each other in the low medieval period and early crusading period. And you had a more decentralized lords where it's like you still had feudalism, but later on, once Spain started centralizing, once you got those four kingdoms, and once they took over the Gironde, it's spelled similar to Grenade. That's the last Muslim territory I took over at the bottom. And by the way, that last Muslim territory I took over, that was like the most wealthy and fertile part of Spain, and its standard of living went down because it's the exploitative aristocratic system that was over in Spain. So on one hand, they had the same kind of startup shipping business structure as Northern Europe and especially the Netherlands and England. So it's like, hey, let's start the startup and let's see how much money we can make. Well, but the Spanish idea is let's see how many laborers we can get and let's have them dig up gold. Where the Northern European idea was let's go make something.
Right.
So yeah, you get a more
Culturally very different. Yeah. A different result culturally. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, in the short term with a system like that, so because remember the Spanish they had a good military. They weren't doing everything bad, and they had it remember with El Cid and these other local saints. They were able to make all these different holidays. So you look at the French Revolution. Remember how they kept making up new holidays and yeah, they that's a social conditioning method that came from the Spanish Masons actually. So they had all this manufactured unity, and it would also correspond with military power moves. So it's like in the short term, that can work out for a power, especially so yeah, they were a frontier culture. They just took over the Muslims, and they were very good at assimilating and tearing down other cultures. They went out and explored that method of the New World. They were able to get a bunch of gold. They were able to get a bunch of labor. They actually expanded trafficking and slave routes to the point where for a while in the early colonial period, places like the Netherlands and France actually had to get permission from the Spanish to be able to participate in the slave trade.
Oh.
Um, and another part of this is the Inquisition. So the Inquisition would be the one to enforce cultural unity. Now there's a lot of people argue, oh well, the Inquisition killing tens of millions of people, that's just Protestant propaganda. I used to think that, but there's a book on the figures behind the Inquisition that does a breakdown to it, and it comes to the conclusion that at least 50 million people were killed by the Inquisition. There's it's like just look at Goa, what the Portuguese. So I know the Portuguese aren't Spanish, but it's all Iberian. They have a very similar culture, and
So you're saying
that's
you don't think that the Inquisition killed
no,
millions
I
of people?
do,
Oh,
I do.
okay. Okay. That's
No, I'm
interesting.
saying I'm saying for a while because the kind of figures the kind of figures they put out, what they do is they kind of play definition games and what counts as the Inquisition and all this and who approved of this, and they come to the conclusion that it's only 6,000 people, but
Oh,
actually the Albigense and Waldense genocides where entire villages were wiped out. That is actually part of the Inquisition. So it's like they narrow the scope of what Inquisition means, and
mm,
it's like, but the book I can send you the book, but
okay.
it's about 50 pages. It addresses a
Oh,
lot of those misconceptions, but
oof.
the Inquisition, that's where a lot of these MK Ultra mind control techniques actually came from. So, and another thing that's interesting
Mhm.
is the Jesuit order at first, since they were part of the Almombrados, the Spanish Illuminati, they were actually being oppressed by the Inquisition, but eventually the Jesuit order actually ended up running the Inquisition too, and they were competing with the Franciscans and Dominicans who were also running it, and that's one of the reasons why the Franciscans and Dominicans really didn't like the Jesuits and why they were competing with them and trying to get them kicked out of all these territories.
Wow. And
But
where can you find that information?
well, that that Edmund Paris book is actually one of them.
Okay.
But if you look into the Jesuit suppressions, like it would be Franciscans, Dominicans putting the pressure on them, and some of it also. So on a Wikipedia, if you look into this, it'll talk about Jesuits being for abolition and trying to stop slavery.
Okay.
But the main people editing the Wikipedia pages are actually them. So it won't talk about how the Jesuits were kicked out of China and Japan for actually enslaving and trafficking women and children there, and including yeah, one of them was
Just on
Cosmere.
Wikipedia?
No, Wikipedia won't
Oh,
have that, but I have it posted. So yeah, Wikipedia makes it
okay.
sound like the Franciscans, Dominicans, they were the bad guys trafficking people because of course
Okay.
the people running Wikipedia are going to want to make their historic rivals look bad. Oh yeah, it's the Franciscans, Dominicans, and Jews. Those are the people running the slave trade. The Jesuits were innocent, and they butted heads with the Franciscans and Dominicans because they were standing up for the oppressed. Like that's what Wikipedia says.
Wow.
And like
Interesting.
it's complete
Very
revision. I have receipts. I have receipts like because why would they get kicked out of Japan? Why would they get kicked out of
right.
India? Why would they get kicked out of all these? It's because they were the top traffickers.
Okay.
And oh yeah, oh shoot, what's that movie called? I think it's called Silence. There's a movie about the Jesuits going to Japan, and the way it portrays it is the Japanese are these backwater bumpkins who can't appreciate the hand feeding them. And then the Jesuits were caught between these backwater bumpkins and these greedy Portuguese and Spanish merchants. And that's why they ended up getting victimized because they were standing up between these greedy people and these stupid locals. And that's how Hollywood, that's how Jesuit Hollywood is
That
trying to paint it.
wow. Interesting. Well, where
I'm
can
not
I
sure if
find
Silence. I'm not sure if Silence is a Japanese one. There's another one based in Japan, but like
okay.
it's been so long since I've seen these. Some of these are blurring together.
Okay. I'll
No,
have to look.
Silence. Oh yeah, this actually gets Silence. That actually gets to some of the MK Ultra type methods here because it talks about how you have to, you're when you're at this retreat, you're always in silence, but
Mhm.
It's like they have you in isolation. It's a kind of it actually
It's
induces
torture. Yeah.
yeah, and but part of when they have all this silence, they're also being subjected to certain meditations, certain
Right.
repetitions. It's like it's the exact same thing going on with these esoteric cults. And
Yeah.
when you look into MK Ultra mind control experiments, part of what they did is sensory deprivation,
Yep.
isolation, it's it's like
Torture.
it's the exact same thing.
Thing. Wow. Well, this has been fascinating. We're coming up on 3 hours, so I'm thinking maybe we'll start to wind down. We can definitely do a follow-up, though.
Well, yeah. I just wanna well, let's see. Yeah, I wanna go through how this goes into politics because
Okay.
wanna get to the point where just wanna make the point that these these methodologies that are used for mind control and exerting influence on other people, what we're getting out with the Enlightenment is that the Enlightenment ends up justifying it, and those ideas they're messing with fundamental categories and how people perceive the world. And once those become the consensus, you get the collectivism and exploitiveness that you had with Spain, where this ultimately synthesized from. So just really quick though, with when it came to
Yeah.
Spanish colonialism, and it's like okay, they had a parliamentary system. People look, they had like startups. That's capitalism. They had a parliamentary system. They had a constitution. But what made it different from England is the Spanish king openly had a complete ownership over corporations and companies. So it's like, hey, if there's a mining startup over here, the king can seize it and give it to one of his noble friends. So this is why this is why a lot of people say that like Spanish people, there's a culture of laziness and lack of motivation
Mm,
because there if you're working, that's a sign of being low class because the elites they exploit people and they boss around workers. So not working, that's a sign of being an aristocrat, and working, that's a sign that you're poor. So it's really not a stable system. So it actually makes sense why after Spain came over and started extracting silver, that their open power started to decline. Now I would argue because those methodologies came from there that their elites are still top. Like the Spanish royal family, I'd argue they're actually above King Charles, and they're the ones behind the Obama sleeper cells and all that. That's a whole nother video to get into, but they're a pretty big deal. I mean, I'll just say it's interesting that the King of Spain, King Juan Carlos, just had pocket change to give his favorite concubine his mistress Princess Diana 100 million, just like it was pocket change. And then once he got caught for laundering a bunch of money and all this, and including Iran Contras, he actually funded Iran Contras. So he was they were like, oh, King Felipe the Sixth, like, oh man, like I have to diss my you're a little they're just doing PR branding. But he went to Abu Dhabi and he's all up in Qatar, which is like the top money laundry for the Middle East region. Like
are. Yeah.
yeah, he's
And
like
it's also an
and
intelligence hotbed, yeah.
well,
Mm.
yeah, well, yeah. I'll just these Spanish connections. They're still behind the scenes running the Muslim Arab world. Like they never actually lost these Muslim connections. It's funny because people talk about the Catholic Church, people talk about the Jews, people talk about the Protestant Freemasons, but hardly anyone ever talks about these Muslim world, Middle Eastern power centers, which are still very relevant. It's like
They're the
when you hear these
largest voting bloc of the UN, the OIC. Largest voting bloc.
yeah, so when you hear these people talking about conspiracies and narratives, it's almost like, well, after the Crusades, the Muslim just became irrelevant. That's hogwash.
Right. Right. Yeah. But it's not politically correct, so that's, not where people go. Yeah.
Okay, so just to wrap things up, so this is
Yeah.
relating. So remember, we were talking about Descartes last time. I started getting into Descartes, so this is gonna follow up on that.
Yes.
So Descartes, he's a Kabbalist. I think, therefore, I am. He's codifying the first Hermetic principle, and I'm going to show you right
Yes.
here where he
Cogito
actually
ergo
peddles
sum.
he peddles the second hermetic principle, the second hermetic law is the principle of correspondence, as above, so below. This
Yep.
ties into the macrocosm, microcosm stuff we were talking about. So it's like it's the same logic in macrocosm, microcosm. It's like what you have an inner cosmos in the universe, and your attitude can correspond with with what's above. So if you have a good attitude, you get the law of attraction. If your
Right.
inner cosmos is aligned with the outer cosmos, whatever things that you want to happen, that's also part of the process of apotheosis, of becoming God. So your mind can impact reality. Like
Yeah.
Descartes says, "I think, therefore I am." That's him saying that I think, therefore I am. It's not just a logical proposition. He's saying his thinking is the causing of his being, like he's a creator.
Yep. 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 Yep.
It's the same esoteric cult, but so top this is from Matt Marino. This is from Matt Marino, A Christian's Guide to the Enlightenment. This is one of the sources hardly anyone, guys, check out Matt Marino. He's kind of hard to find on searches. If you go to Sermon Audio, you might find his stuff. So this is a transcript. So Thomas Sowell wrote a book called A Conflict of Visions in 1987, and he was comparing two different views to politics, what he calls the constrained vision, the unconstrained vision. And the unconstrained vision winds up being what we call modern conservatism. The unconstrained vision, by the way of the thing that's being constrained or unconstrained, is the human capacity to reform society, essentially create a utopia. Sowell is looking at what we might call utopianism. And what he says is that if you look at the French revolutionaries, in particular, Godwin, Condorcet, and Robespierre, all these people that were writing in the 1780s and 90s, if you look at them, they're operating in an unconstrained vision, meaning they have an a priori, and that means before experienced, view of what society ought to be like. So yeah, doesn't matter what the evidence says, their ideological framework is the ultimate system. That's
Right.
yeah, Reform Classicalist, another website where you can find him. He's pretty solid. In other words, they're like a bunch of kids in the car saying, "Mommy, are we there yet? Why
Mhm.
doesn't life look more perfect yet?" They don't see the world as a world of trade-offs, as a tragic vision in the world of death, that it's not infinitely perfectible, that human nature is not infinitely malleable in the hands of some societal innovator. What Sowell is ultimately showing is there is rationalism at work in the modern political impulse, and rationalism, that's Descartes' system. So, yeah, because Matt Moreno, he doesn't talk about the hermetic and Gnostic side of this as much. Like he'll sometimes brush on it, but he doesn't really buy into conspiracy. Like actually, I've messaged him on Facebook. He's actually entertained me, but he he wrote this before, like a decade before I ever talked to him. But yeah, so they, because they are cultists who believe they can be the creator.
Yep.
They think that human nature evolves
Yep.
into this completely made up dialectic vision where, all right, so they have an idea that the law of the universe is going to be more of what I like and less of what I don't like. Therefore, humanity's ultimate outcome is going to be more of what I like and not what I don't like. So therefore, they can be malleable and molded because I already know the universe works this way. It's such circular BS,
Yeah.
but that's where Descartes coming from. And this is in our entire political operating system. So Descartes brings you, and remember, it's going to result in the Spanish system because the Spanish ruling class is what synthesized all this, what exported it. So this is another reason why I want to focus on the Spanish part, because like the English elite, they have been corrupt for a while. Like I am not defending them in any way, but they gave concession because they had a different robust system, a different robust culture. So they have a creative culture where people can innovate, and the people in the ruling class who I would say were criminals and corrupt are responding to that. So I'd say liberalism is in a lot of ways a concession. So I mean, it's not perfect. You had some plans form what's called liberalism, but
Yeah.
overall it's a much preferable direction to go than any other human system. And I'd say it's because it came from a genuine organic spirit of innovation. And that's partly because the cultural assumptions and the like not everyone who makes the pages of history is just plants. Like John Wycliffe, for instance, I actually think John Wycliffe and all those guys writing those Bibles that were called the Lollards, because like, oh, you're a Lollard, blah blah blah, like you're saying a bunch of nonsense because you're trying to translate the Bible in your own language. I actually think those guys were genuine dissidents who moved the needle. And all the Masons in the Reformation who people talk about, like, oh, look, there's these Masons, therefore it's all fake. It's like that was more when people look at Masons in the Reformation and bad actors colluding with like Catholic power players. Also, what that is, that's containment. That doesn't mean that all those impulses are fake. So s- same things going on with the way the British and later on Americans run economies. What all the people, either from England, Spain, or Italy, they're trying to inject this Spanish Masonic system into free markets so they can have absolute control, just like the King of Spain did back in the day. So this is going back to Matt Marino. Descartes brings you on this journey through these three books, and that'll be the Meditation on Discourse, Methods. Yeah, I want the three books I named the last show, because this is from the same series. This is from the same series where Matt Marino also talks about Descartes, and I started getting into those books because of Matt Marino. So he sets you up for why he is sitting there with his wrecking ball with the foundations of an old order, and he commits the whole to part fallacy. So there you go. It's about going from one order to another.
Right.
In I'd say 30 Years' War were instantly orchestrated. I talked about the Augsburg Peace Treaty and how it was pretty much made to fail and start a war. But that's something we went over on the last one. He sees that because the ordering mind, namely God, the intelligent designer, is much more efficient in all of his works than those works would be if left to individual units, that therefore each ordering mind is sufficient to do any and every work. You see the rationalism there. Things work better when an intelligent agent has a plan. Okay, yeah, I'll buy that, especially when we're talking about God, right? So you have an
Right.
ordering mind. And when an ordering mind works on his subject matter, it goes better than if 50,000 agents, maybe intelligent, maybe unintelligent, are working on the same thing. But that's just Romans 8:28, Genesis 50:20, and Ephesians 1:11. So he goes on to say, okay, let's read Descartes charitably. Descartes' professing Christian. I'm sure that Descartes is assuming providence. So
Mhm.
us Christians can read that into him. And Descartes just made a boo boo. I think Descartes was literally using deceptive language
I
to
think so. It's
drift
a
to
something.
Christians. Yeah,
Yeah.
and have Christians accept principles of
Hermetic
Kabbalism.
principle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And Hermeticism.
Kabbalah is pretty much Hermeticism. It's the
Yeah.
same thing, pretty much. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So from the way, from the way God works and the way the image of God works on a thing, Descartes observed in his words that there is often not so much perfection in works composed of many pieces and made by hands of various master craftsmen as there are in those works on which but a single individual has worked. So that's actually from Descartes. That's not Matt Marino's commentary. So that's going to break to Matt Marino's commentary. Well, my first response to him is that I don't think Descartes has seen enough of the Industrial Revolution with its division of labor. But that's not the main trouble. The main trouble is with this observation that it made him think that the whole system of reason could work the same way. So, yeah, he's so in rationalism, and this became one side of the artificial dialectic, the Enlightenment,
Yeah.
rationalism versus empiricism. In that they say, well, we need a reference point. Well, reason, the abstract, is the reference point. So what they'll say on one hand is, yeah, reason is the laws of logic. Reason is universally true. It's like, that's true, but they do a sleight of hand where all of us, because remember, like, he's comparing the way God's mind works, which does have these universal categories are the mind of God, but he's going on to apply that logic to humans where, oh yeah, we need to have a command economy because one ordering mind is better than others. Like, yeah, that's literally what he's arguing. He's arguing for distributism, the same thing these Franco Spanish Mason fanboys like Jack Posobiec are promoting. Like, oh my gosh, we need American Francoism. Like, it's that all these people are trying to get us there. Like, and hardly anyone talks about the Spanish Masonry behind all this.
Right.
But yeah, I just got one more paragraph to go. We can get in a little commentary and wrap this up.
Yeah.
So this goes back to Matt Marino. We're going to make an analogy to economics for a second. If a great singular organization like a business is the result of a great single vision, then here's the inference. It's a false inference. If a singular business is like that, a result of a great singular vision, then we'll have a singular mass of businesses as a whole that we would call a macroeconomy, must also of necessity be perfected to the degree that it comes from a singular reason. So that's a singular mind. He's like
Yep.
he's like saying God's providence works the same way people overseeing a bunch of companies, like maybe a king, could work. It's, you reckon you recognize that thinking? That's collectivism. That's command economy, central control, socialism, communism, all that good stuff. Statism, universalism applied to economics, right? Now, that would be true if he meant the invisible hand of Adam Smith would
Mm.
would go on to mean, in other words, if God was the singular mind orchestrating all this, well, then that would be true. Not necessarily true of finite reason, because yeah, what rationalism does is it makes capital R reason, does a card trick between that and your own reason, like it, and that makes your mind the mind of God, because Descartes is a Kabbalist hermeticist who believes all this hogwash. So
Well,
the
it's
rationalist,
it's what Hegel did too, right? When he talks about the
yes,
rational, he actually says rational is speculative, and he says that speculative and mysticism are no different. So he actually spells it out. I mean, you just have to look for it. But he's basically saying that it's all Hermeticism. I mean, he pretty
yeah,
much
yeah,
said,
well, yeah, because the and this is why he had to take a Brecon ball to Thomistic and Catholic, and also Protestants had a scholastic tradition, but like the actual Protestant scholasticism is actually pretty similar to Catholic scholasticism. Like, where they disagree is more they disagree with the Pope. They don't disagree on methodology, but
right.
that's why Descartes, like, oh, we can't start with the law of identity. We can't start with the law of non-contradiction. We can't start with these Aristotelian principles, because he wouldn't go out of his way to insult Aristotle, which, and I'm not saying it's, but like, what when these guys go after Aristotle, knock down the pin of Aristotle, they're actually knocking down the pin of objectivity. And they're not just going
Yeah.
after. It's like, I couldn't care less what Aristotle says, but he got the laws of logic right. Like,
Yeah.
that's where
Sure.
I'm coming out with this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the rationalists began to believe that all of our thinking, both theoretical and practical, could unfold out of the human mind like a long sum or a geometric proof. In fact, it gets really crazy when you get to Spinoza. So yeah, like, we can get into those other rationalists last time. It's Spinoza. I wanted to end with Spinoza because that gets he Spinoza is someone, if you're like, you're being uncharitable with Descartes. Well, okay, Spinoza takes Descartes' line of reasoning, but he
He
applies
was a
it and
monist.
he comes yeah, like,
Yeah.
that's he's Spinoza is more consistent with Descartes' reasoning than Descartes is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And Spinoza is who, like, all of the theosophical mystics today attribute everything to. I mean, it's Spinoza all the way through.
And no one, if it wasn't for Descartes, no one would have taken Spinoza seriously either. So it's like
I think
this
that's true.
definitely looks like a scripted successive dialectic. I just think it's interesting that lie beans. we talked about this last time, had theoretical math, not symbolic math and symbolic logic,
Symbolic
like
logic.
100 years before Kant. But it's like they had all this stuff. They're just waiting for the right time. Kind of like AI. Like they had AI back in the 50s, maybe even 40s, because like in this British show, The Prisoner, that Jay Dyer actually talks about. I got into it because of Jay Dyer. There's an episode where the villain's an artificial intelligence, and it's like they totally had it. They were just waiting for the right time to make it public. So it's same thing with this. Same
Well, and
thing
they
with
also
these.
have to refine it. It's one thing to have the technology, it's another thing for the technology to be, like, utilized where it could be mass scale deployed.
Well, that's the equivalent of refinement. That's the difference between Adam Weishaupt's Illuminati manifesto and Karl Marx. Like same thing going
I
on
don't disagree. Yeah.
with why the reason why Lie Beans didn't publish it is because he wanted to pass off as Aristotelian, because he was already in hot water with the Hanovers. But by the time Kant came around, David Hume already got rid of the Aristotelian problem by supposedly solving the problem of, like, oh my gosh, we can't even know that the A ball hits the cue ball. Like, how can you even prove that? Like that's where David Hume took it. So then once you can't really even prove causality, because let's just get past all this metaphysics. Metaphysics lead to dogma, and that's why we had people killing each other, because it also wouldn't have worked. They didn't have the trauma of 30 Years War. Like, oh my gosh, look at the trauma of 30 Years War. People were killing each other over metaphysics. Like, oh my gosh, we have Hume giving us rationalization. All right, time to move on from that. And then Kant's like, oh yeah, all right, let's move on from that. Okay, I'll give you something else.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I think we should, wrap it up, but if you have anything else you wanna add before we close out, yeah, to wrap it up.
Well, yeah, I will say, from in our next one we can get back into the Enlightenment, but I just wanted to. And there's other things to talk about, like everything I brought up. I was going over quite a lot of things, but
Mm.
I'm more of trying to give general framing devices and not get into all the details. But it's like, if you start looking into all those time periods I brought out, you'll see that I'm not just there. If I couldn't make up this stuff if I wanted to.
Sure. No, I know. Yeah, it's there. So, yeah, well, maybe you'll give me some of the sources that you want people to look at too, and we'll put those.
Yeah, so yeah, the ones I used for that was Bill Cooper's Mystery Babylon system. The other one would have been Matt Marino's A Christian's Guide to the Enlightenment, which has like the way the way he had it set up. For some reason, the lectures are split up into two playlists. So there's one that has 24 videos, but some of them are duplicated. No, 24 sermons or
Oh,
lectures.
okay.
But then the other one has 16, but some of them are duplicated. So some of them don't, like, won't show up in the other one, but some of them show up in both of them. So it's a little messy and hard to navigate. But I've actually I've gone through all of those back when I was in college, and then I read
Okay.
a lot of the stuff he cited in those ones too. Then the other one's Edmund Paris, and other one is Way of the Templar by Timothy Hogan. So those are the four sources.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, we'll definitely do a follow-up, and we'll get through the enlightenment. But thank you. Tell everybody where they can find you and anything else you wanna add. Yeah.
You can find me. So I have, yeah, there's my Twitter up there. Then I have a YouTube channel with the same name. But if you just look up, my name won't come up on YouTube. I only have like 130 subscribers or something like that. And if you look up my name with Red Symphony, you'll find my first video, and then you can just click on the video and find my channel too. So those are the two things I'm active on.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we'll put the links to those, and yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for watching and listening.